Greetings, imagination connoisseurs. I'm sorry, I was just getting my groove on before the show so I could bring you a groovy show. Once again, I am your Viceroy Verisimilitude, your master of fun and wonder. I am, of course, the existential Mr. Rogers, and as one of my great viewers put it, oh yes, as one of my viewers put it, this is the NPR of the genre pundit space. Welcome to this, the 287th episode of Robservations, the show about something, and I, of course, am your host, Robert Meyer Burnett, and that was Tallulah, Growling, and Gilbert. Tallulah, how are you feeling today? You feeling good? Want a cookie? Might as well get it out of the way. Get it out of the way now, right, Tallulah? Here, have a cookie. There, Tallulah gets a cookie. You see a little snout up there. And, of course, Gilbert gets a cookie, too. Gilbert, come here. Oh, he comes up. He knows what to do. You know what to do, buddy. You want another cookie? You get 2 cookies, and you get 2 cookies. But that's all. I love that. It's like, I want to make one day, I'm going to make a whole Gilbert ASMR video. What do you think, bud? What do you think, buddy? You're just a good kiss, baby. Yeah, now get down. Get down. That kiss could cost me my life. You never know what kind of germs these dogs are harboring. Anyway, it's a holiday weekend. I hope you're enjoying it. I've certainly been enjoying it. By the way, I'm wearing this sweatshirt again. It's not like it's a stinky old sweatshirt. It is cold here in LA, which I kind of love. But I always forget to pimp my own swag. You know, with all the support you guys already give me, I forget that I made like a TeePublic. If you go to TeePublic, I put a link at the beginning of this chat. I think I'm my best customer because I never tell anybody that I have these shirts. But these hoodies, like there's T-shirts there and everything, but I bought one of these hoodies. I love this hoodie. I think this hoodie is great. I love the quality of it. It's really comfortable. It's got fuzz on the inside. It just makes me feel good. So if you're interested in Robservations swag, which I'll be making more of, please go and see the link at the top of this page. By the way, speaking of swag, my buddy Bill Hunt, who runs the Digital Bits website, just opened his own swag store, and he made one of the coolest genre or geek. You know how I love my geeky apparel. Any cool T-shirt, man, I am in. If you can find some geeky T-shirt that I love, that's why I love Last Exit to Nowhere. By the way, they do not sponsor this show. Bill Hunt made one of the coolest shirts ever, and he made a picture of the moon from George Méliès's From the Earth to the Moon, or A Trip to the Moon. And it says Méliès shot first on it with the bullet in the moon. And I just think that shirt's cool. I had to order that. I only ordered a T-shirt, but I'm going to rock one of these sweatshirts because they're great, and it's winter. And for the 2 months of winter we get in LA, I like to wear stylish genre apparel. Speaking of genre apparel, again, now that I think about it, wait a minute, where's my favorite though is a black Phillip. I was wearing it the other day. That famous French picture of the cat, the illustration with the cat. You've all seen it. They did a version with Black Phillip from The Witch. T-Villain. T-Villain was the place I got it from. Another great sweatshirt place, another great genre apparel place. So, by the way, these chats are brought to you by Lucky Tiger Men's grooming products for those men who want to look good and feel great. And if you go to their website at getluckytiger.com, you get 20% when you check out by punching in PGS. But we have a new one. We also have IMC20 for Imagination Connoisseur 20. The channel, my analytics. So if you want to go buy anything for anybody for Christmas, great Christmas gifts are there. But punch in IMC20 now before Christmas because they're looking at my analytics because I have to re-up my sponsorship every year, and I'm working on it. So yeah, anyway, I hope everyone had a good Black Friday. You didn't spend too much money. I didn't buy anything yesterday, which is something new for me. I believe that the month of December, you shouldn't buy anything for yourself, unless a Blu-ray comes out or a book you want to buy, then you probably should. But for the most part, you shouldn't buy anything for yourself and let the Christmas or holiday spirit, the Kwanzaa demon, or is it Kwanzaa demon? What is, Kwanzaa doesn't have a demon. Christmas has Knuckles, right? Knuckles is the there's Krampus, but there's also Knuckles. And Knuckles was an episode of the 80s Twilight Zone that didn't get made because the network thought it was too disturbing, and it was about a Christmas demon, the anti-Superman, the anti-Kris Kringle. Not, I know we've got Krampus, but Knuckles was going to get made, and I think Harlan Ellison either wrote it or was going to direct it. He ended up doing Grandma, the Stephen King story. But yeah, so if you celebrate Hanukkah, by the way, when is the great Hanukkah horror movie? I know some people have made some, but I'd love to, 8 days of killing, something like that could be fun. But anyway, stay in the Christmas spirit. Don't buy yourself anything in the month of December. Just let other people buy stuff for you, because that's what the Christmas spirit is. Or, you know what? If you don't want to buy something from your favorite store, just buy yourself gift cards and don't tell anybody, and then you can use them later, whatever. So a lot of interesting stuff happened. Now, one of the things that I wanted to talk about, I've been watching, as you know, a lot of documentaries about AI, and I keep saying Shenzhou, it's Shenzhen, the city of Shenzhen. The Chinese city of Shenzhen is what I meant. I'm thinking Philippa Georgiou's ship. It's not that. So the Japanese city of Shenzhen, there's a great documentary on that, and then there was a frontline documentary on AI that I watched, and it got me thinking. Every time there's like the 10-year challenge or the 20-year challenge, or if there's ever a challenge, a picture challenge on Facebook, my first go-to position is that, well, of course they're having everybody put up their pictures so their AI algorithms can improve facial recognition. And we're doing it for free. We're just giving them, and you can have the AIs, and you've got weight loss or gain, you've got facial hair loss or gain for guys, you've got, for the women, you've got hair length, makeup, whatever it is. We are giving away our data. Because if you find out watching any of these documentaries, data is the most valuable thing in this day and age, really, for companies and corporations, getting that sweet, sweet data mined. And when you put up these pictures, the before and after, or look how 10 years have passed by, and you're putting it on Facebook, you think they're not using that to train their AI facial recognition algorithms to get better than they are. And when you do it en masse, you got people of all ethnicities, all backgrounds, all anything, and we're just doing it for free. And I thought, I just kind of am bemused by it, as I am about most things in the modern day. But Wired dropped an article. Actually, this article was dropped in January, last January 15th. And it popped up again in my feed. But what's really interesting is it's about the very same thing, the 10-year challenge, which, this was back in January, and I remember it being done the first time. So this article, this is an op-ed piece that I thought was worth sharing, by Kate O'Neill. And it was dropped on January 15th, 2019. So the beginning of last year. I figured, why not? I came across it today, and I would read this because suddenly the 10-year challenge has popped back up. It's like, oh, we need more algorithms, or we need more data for our AI algorithms. So let's just start up the 10-year challenge again and see where we're at. So this op-ed piece written by Kate O'Neill says, opinion: the 2009 versus 2019 profile picture trend may or may not have been a data collection ruse to train its facial recognition algorithm, but we can't afford to blithely play along. This is a Wired opinion. And Kate O'Neill tweeted, instead of joining in, I posted the following semi-sarcastic tweet. Me 10 years ago probably would have played along with the profile picture aging meme going around on Facebook and Instagram. Me now ponders how all this data could be mined to train facial recognition algorithms on age progression and age recognition. First of all, I'm not a conspiracy theorist, really, because this is true. Like, I believe that this is absolutely true. And why not? Your data is worth lots of money, and somebody would pay for this, but why pay for something you can make hip, and people will do something for you for free? What did the Joker say? What did Heath Ledger's Joker say? So anyway, I read this article. My flippant tweet began to pick up traction. My intent wasn't to claim that the meme is inherently dangerous, but I knew the facial recognition scenario was broadly plausible and indicative of a trend that people should be aware of. It's worth considering the depth and breadth of the personal data we share without reservations. Of those who were critical of my thesis, many argued that the pictures were already available anyway. The most common rebuttal was, that data is already available. Facebook's already got all the profile pictures. Of course they do. In various versions of the meme, people were instructed to post their first profile picture alongside their current profile picture, or a picture from 10 years ago alongside their current profile picture. So yes, these profile pictures exist. They've got upload timestamps. Many people have a lot of them, and for the most part, they're publicly accessible. But let's play out this idea. Imagine that you wanted to train a facial recognition algorithm on age-related characteristics, and more specifically, on age progression, e.g. how people are likely to look as they get older. Ideally, you'd want a broad and rigorous data set with lots of people's pictures. It would help if you knew they were taken a fixed number of years apart, say 10 years. So you could mine Facebook for profile pictures and look at posting dates or other data. But that whole set of profile pictures could end up generating a lot of useless noise. People don't reliably upload pictures in chronological order, and it's not uncommon for users to post pictures of something other than themselves as a profile picture. A quick glance through my Facebook friends' profile pictures shows a friend's dog who just died, several cartoons, word images, abstract patterns, and more. In other words, it would help if you had a clean, simple, helpfully labeled set of then and now photos. What's more, for the profile pictures on Facebook, the photo posting date wouldn't necessarily match the date the picture was taken, even if the metadata on the photo wouldn't always be reliable for accessing that date. Why? People could have scanned offline photos. They might have uploaded pictures multiple times over the years. Some people resort to uploading screenshots of pictures found elsewhere online. Some platforms strip data for privacy. Through the Facebook meme, most people have been helpfully adding that context back in. Me in 2008, me in 2018, as well as further info, in most cases about where and how the pic was taken. 2008 at the University of whatever, taken by Joe. 2018, visiting New York City for this year's such and such event. In other words, thanks to this meme, there's now a very large data set of carefully curated photos of people from roughly 10 years ago and now. Of course, not all the dismissive comments in my Twitter mentions were about pictures already being available. Some critics noted that there was too much crap data to be usable, but data researchers and scientists know how to account for this. As with hashtags that go viral, you can generally place more trust in the validity of data earlier on in the trend or campaign before people begin to participate ironically or attempt to hijack the hashtag for irrelevant purposes. As for bogus pictures, image recognition algorithms are pretty sophisticated enough to pick out a human face. If you uploaded an image of a cat 10 years ago, and now, as one of my friends did, adorably, that particular sample would be easy to throw out. For its part, Facebook denies having any hand in the 10-year challenge. Quote, "This is a user-generated meme that went viral on its own," a Facebook spokesperson responded. "Facebook did not start this trend, and the meme uses photos that already exist on Facebook. Facebook gains nothing from this meme, besides reminding us of the questionable fashion trends of 2009. As a reminder, Facebook users can choose to turn facial recognition on or off at any time. Even if this particular meme isn't a case of social engineering, the past few years have been rife with examples of social games and memes designed to extract and collect data. Just think of the mass data extraction of more than 70 million Facebook users performed by Cambridge Analytica." And this article goes on. Now, here's the thing. Facebook can say, we didn't start this meme. Well, of course, but as soon as a meme like this starts, you don't think that there's people that are in there immediately taking all the data people themselves are coming up with memes or challenges that I'm sure the scientists hadn't even thought of. And what they're doing is taking all of that stuff that we're just throwing out into the world and utilizing it, which I frankly think is awesome. I mean, one of the things that people I guess I would call it a controversial opinion, which is the meddling in the election of 2016, the Russian meddling. Everyone knows, our intelligence agencies knows that that's true. Well, here's the thing. It wasn't illegal. It was a bad actor, I would say, utilizing data and utilizing situations and utilizing mechanisms such as social media that we put in place. that not only do we put it in place, we're actively using it. So somebody comes along and says, you know what we can do? We can weaponize social media and we can use it to create or bend large populations to our own will. We don't even have to do anything nefarious. Well, it is nefarious, but we can just sit back and create dissent with strokes of a keyboard. And I thought that was pretty genius. You got to give it up. I mean, that's utilizing new technologies in very interesting ways. To me, that's a science fiction movie. As a matter of fact, my friend Dave Hargrove and I have been talking about over the past couple of years writing the ultimate conspiracy thriller. And we know what it's going to be about. We jump off like the X-Files did from the parallax view, where a reporter in a war-torn situation sees something very unusual. I won't say what it is, but something that clearly doesn't belong there. And then the reporter starts digging in and finding similar things throughout, well, history. And it goes from there. And I've always wanted to make that movie. I love paranoid conspiracy thrillers. I loved it in the movie Strange Days, in Catherine Bigelow's Strange Days, when one of the characters tells Lenny Nero, it's not whether you're paranoid, Lenny, it's whether you're paranoid enough. I love that stuff. And watching this, to me, it's all science fiction. We're living in the future. If you haven't read modern science fiction, you haven't been paying attention, because a lot of great cutting-edge modern science fiction, whether it's the work of, say, Charles Stross or my favorite Peter Watts or anybody else like that, they're all over this stuff. I mean, even Jonathan Mayberry, whose last Joe Ledger novel, Rage, came out at the beginning of November. God love Jonathan Mayberry for getting these books out every year, deals with this material. So it's just funny to me that every time a meme like this gets traction and explodes, again, this is what, the second time this year, I have to smile, because when you live in a sci-fi world, you have to accept the sci-fi consequences. And in a way, I just wish that we I wish every human being had an agent, and an agent who would represent your data to a company, just like hopefully one day I'll have another agent again representing my interests in Hollywood, even though I found that the times I've had agents in the past, I end up doing most of the work, and then they reap the benefits, little as they might be. But I think it's interesting that everybody, we've been freely giving data away, and we know it. We know we're doing it. But, whether you read about what happened with Cambridge Analytica, really nobody cares. Because in the long run, we all think, we all have this defeatist attitude about, well, nothing I can do about it. That's true. There's probably nothing you can do about it now. But we can do something moving forward in the future. And one of the things that we're not doing is protecting our future rights. I talked a lot about, not a lot, but I talked a little bit about a David Cronenberg script that I always wanted to see made. He made a short film earlier in his career, and you can find it on certain releases of social media. The first edition of Dead Ringers on Laserdisc from the Criterion Collection included a short film called Crimes of the Future. Now, I don't know if Shout Factory released Crimes of the Future on their disc, but Dead Ringers is one of my favorite Cronenberg movies. But Crimes of the Future, his student film, was very different than his screenplay. And his screenplay was about a division of law enforcement that is going after things that people are doing, future shock things that have yet to be classified as crimes because nobody knows they exist yet. And I always loved that script. It was a great script, really out there. It would have been the bow. If anyone made it, the way The Irishman was kind of the bow that ties up a lot of Martin Scorsese's work, which, by the way, I loved The Irishman. I want to talk about this show too. If David Cronenberg ever made Crimes of the Future, his script Crimes of the Future, it would sort of be the bow that tied up all of his body horror films throughout his career. I'd certainly love to see him make that script. There was one time when I met him, it was at a signing, and I told him I'd read that script, and he was actually very distressed that I had my hands on it. I told him I'd got it from an agency when I was reading screenplays for a living, and it made him feel a little better. The internet wasn't around the way it is now, so I wasn't disseminating the script. I think I might have copied it for a few people, but I really wanted him to make that script. That's why movies like Minority Report or the stories that Philip K. Dick wrote, Minority Report about pre-crime, and now we're seeing that pre-crime might be real. You know, with the advent of deep learning AI, there are certain risk factors that can be analyzed. I wouldn't be surprised if we see pre-crime happening anytime soon. It might happen sometime soon, and who knows? Who knows? Anyway, just interesting. It's something I'm thinking about, and I don't just think about movies and TV and comic books and action figures and model kits and genre sweatshirts. I think about other things. All of this fuels my interest into life itself. That said, there was another article that came out today. That one came out in January. This came out today. This is the editor's pick. Sure, it's the editor's pick. This is clickbaity all the way, but I'm going to read it anyway. It's by Paul Tassi, and it was in Forbes. It was in Forbes today. And here's the headline. It was posted at 8 o'clock this morning. Paul Tassi says, the headline is, Star Wars fans aren't arguing about The Mandalorian, and it's weird. And allow me to read. If you have been following Star Wars for the past 40 years, he did put the in there, you'll know that its fans love endlessly debating its various major and minor entries, arguments which sometimes can turn quite hostile, and in the modern era of social media, have even spilled over to do active harm to some of the directors and stars in the latest films. The Mandalorian, the new Disney Plus live-action Star Wars show, the first in history, seems different. While I don't want to say no one is arguing about The Mandalorian in any capacity, the debates here seem relatively minor. As in, Episode 4 wasn't quite as good as Episode 2, or The Mandalorian's statement about removing his helmet may go against canon. Generally speaking, however, by the way, as an aside, I love the fact in Episode 4, she said, when was the last time you took your helmet off? And he said, yesterday. I mean, he takes off his costume. I'm sure he washes it. He just does it when no one's around. While I don't want to say no one is arguing about The Mandalorian, the Mandalorian statement about removing his helmet may go against canon. Generally speaking, however, the main split among Star Wars fans is whether or not you like the show, really like the show, or love the show. It seems to be uniting the Star Wars fan base on a level we haven't seen in ages. If you travel back through time, it sure seems like every major live-action Star Wars release has endured either a debate over its innate quality, or if the fan base has been unified, it's because something was outright terrible. Let's take a look. Solo 2018 was a rare commercial miss in that many fans simply weren't interested in a non-Harrison Ford revisiting of the classic character in a prequel. Solo performed so poorly relative to other releases, it altered Disney's entire plan for Star Wars films going forward. The Last Jedi, 2017. I think this is, without question, the most polarizing film on this list, which had some saying it was a masterpiece and one of the series' best, with others citing the prime example of the Disney era dismantling what true fans loved about Star Wars. The discourse around this movie soiled the movie itself. It was so severe. Not just the movie, but I would say Star Wars fandom entirely. Rogue One, 2016. I feel like this might be the film that was the least controversial amongst fans, though many argued it didn't feel like it justified its existence, and some critics felt it got too fan servicey by the end, with Vader's presence capping off a uniquely bleak ending. The Force Awakens in 2015, though perhaps not as argued about as The Last Jedi, the first Disney-era film, was certainly controversial all the same, with some believing J.J. Abrams had recaptured the magic of the series, while others thought it was far too derivative of past films. Also, like The Last Jedi, a lot of pushback comes from debates about social justice infecting Star Wars, which seems to come down to using women and people of color as leads and little else. And this has been an unfortunate debate point for most new Disney-era productions, regardless of their actual quality. Revenge of the Sith, Going back another full decade, most people declared Revenge of the Sith the best of the prequels, yet that was grading on a curve given the quality of the other two. Attack of the Clones. If most Star Wars fans agree on anything, it's that Attack of the Clones is probably the worst Star Wars film by quite a wide margin. By the way, an opinion that I don't share and I'm kind of perplexed by, to be honest. The Phantom Menace, 1999. The prequel that launched a million memes. You may have loved it as a kid, but it does not hold up over time for anything but joke viewing or countertakes like, actually, the prequels are good, which is far from a universally accepted opinion among fans. Return of the Jedi. Even Return of the Jedi divided fans pretty sharply with its Ewok-laden finale, which struck a much lighter tone than the past two films. Empire and A New Hope? I mean, again, not to say no one had any issues with them, but I think most fans are united in that this was the series at its best. By the way, I would like to dispel the rumor, or it's not a rumor, but there is a perception amongst some people, mostly younger people, not to put younger people down, that there was the opinion of Empire Strikes Back was divisive. And some people will trot out certain reviews and say, see, not amongst the fan base. Everyone loved Empire. Everyone. And that's not just because I saw it 26 times in theater. I'm telling you, I never talked to one person growing up when I went and saw it when I was 13 years old that did not love The Empire Strikes Back. So this idea that it was divisive amongst Star Wars fans at the time is absolutely and categorically untrue. So now we arrive at The Mandalorian, which, after 4 episodes, is technically the length of a feature film now. And will be essentially 2 of them by the time season 1 and its 8 30-minute episodes, or in the case of yesterday's episode, 40-minute episodes, have aired. Jon Favreau, writer of the series, has created something special here, drawing on pretty obvious influences from old samurai films and westerns, which were in turn the original inspiration for Star Wars in the first place. The Jedis are based on the samurai, after all, though here our Ronin is a bounty hunter, and the Jedi and the Sith are nowhere to be found, so far. The show has already created iconic characters just 4 episodes in, with the blank-faced Mandalorian himself, voiced expertly by Pedro Pascal, who unfortunately may never get to show his face in the series due to the nature of the character. And of course, I think he absolutely will show his face at some point, although maybe he won't. Maybe he'll take a page from Judge Dredd and do what they didn't do in the Judge Dredd films until Carl Urban played Judge Dredd, where you'll never see Pedro Pascal's face. And of course, there's Baby Yoda, the most adorable creation in Star Wars history, but one that isn't dismissed as kid stuff by fans, like Ewoks or Jar Jar, who are played for comic relief. Baby Yoda is both too cute to hate, no matter how hard your heart, but also incredibly important to the plot of the series and Star Wars lore in general, given how little we know about Yoda's force-powered species. The show simply works. Its tight runtimes are working to its benefit, allowing its big budget to maximize its effect. Its minimalist cast carries the series, and these little mini arcs of the Mandalorian saving the day result in many of the best action sequences the series has seen, even if they're laden with less CGI than their big budget movie counterparts. That actually works to its advantage, I'd argue. Last episode in particular highlighted the smaller scale of the show works well, even when suddenly an ATST, a mech we've seen a million times before, can become the most terrifying thing in the world when the stakes are lower. The Mandalorian is pitching a perfect game so far, and it has placated a fan base that is almost impossible to please. Can it keep this up? Who knows, but so far, so good. That's from Paul Tassi, Tassi. You can follow him on Twitter. Well, yesterday, of course, I was waxing rhapsodic about my love of the Star Wars franchise and how I'm in the throes of a new renaissance of Star Wars love, at least for the month of December coming up. I'm every time I see more stuff from the Rise of Skywalker, I get excited against all my better judgment. I've never been a fan of what J.J. Abrams did. I've often said controversially, I liked The Last Jedi more than I liked The Force Awakens because there's really interesting things to me that happened. To me, I don't mind seeing Luke Skywalker, unlike the character we saw 30 years previously at the end of Jedi, because life happens to people. People get burnt out and disillusioned. You never know why. They just do. I'm one of the only people I know that keeps up this youthful exuberance. and love of everything that I love, except, of course, Star Trek. If I allowed what's happened to Star Trek over the last 10 years to corrode my soul, I wouldn't get excited about other things. But I understand where people are coming from when Star Wars isn't what they want it to be. I used to love Star Wars. I still do. I'm loving it right now. But what do I think of The Mandalorian? You know, as much as I'm enjoying The Mandalorian, and Elizabeth has gone through all of the Star Wars movies, except we have not watched Last Jedi again because it's not streaming. Maybe I'll throw on my 3D disc of it and make her watch it in 3D, or not. We'll just watch the disc. And I'm looking forward. I want to watch Last Jedi again. I haven't seen it in a while. But I enjoyed The Last Jedi. I thought plot-wise it had a lot of things wrong with it. I thought structurally, if the Canto Bight stuff had happened in the beginning of the movie and you never saw Finn and you never saw Rose Tico on the Rebel ships in the beginning and then they left in the middle of a chase, I think everybody's problems would have been alleviated. They were already on their mission and they were supposed to rendezvous, and they find out the Rebel base or the Resistance base has been obliterated. Now the ships are on the move and they needed to get back because they wanted to get into that Rebel base, and the code breaker was what was going to get them to do that, or something along those lines. So anyway, I don't think it's a perfect movie, but I do think what Luke does at the end is one of the most baller Jedi moves ever, because if truly the Force for a Jedi is supposed to be used for defense, never for attack, I don't think that there's any more baller Jedi move that has ever been done in the history of Star Wars than what Luke does at the end of Last Jedi. To me, incredibly heroic. He found his internal wherewithal to do something we'd never seen a Jedi do before. There was some real power being wielded at the end of The Last Jedi, and I thought that was interesting. I thought I dug it, and I didn't, by the way, I didn't see it coming. When I was watching the movie, it was truly a revelation. It was something new where I went, wow, man, that was interesting. And for a Star Wars movie to make me not know about something that was going to happen at the movie, I think for that alone, I thought that was interesting. But do I love The Mandalorian? Now, here's the thing. At first, I was a little, there's a lot of things about The Mandalorian that have made me scratch my head, which is, so you've got an Imperial base, you've got the Mandalorian, the secret Mandalorian enclave, and you have this bar where all the bounty hunters hang out, basically on a couple of streets in this town. Well, at first that really bothered me. But then as the show has gone on, I'm like, the whole thing is such... At first I didn't know if it was going to be as much of a riff on Westerns, and specifically spaghetti Westerns, The Man with No Name and all that. I didn't realize just how much of a riff on all of these tropes it was going to be. And then, of course, the fourth episode is very much Seven Samurai, let's protect the village, that kind of thing. And now that I've realized... Now, on one hand, yes. Is it very deep? No. And does it seem more like an animated series? Yes. And is it so far, we're basically watching this character being put through very well-worn, well-trodden Western tropes. I get it. Totally agree with all of that. However, as I am continuing to watch the show and I'm sitting back, I find myself really enjoying what's happening. I mean, people have pointed out, they trained the villagers to help fight. I mean, what I find really interesting is, and since Jon Favreau is writing the whole thing, as I've talked about on this show before, what I'm most interested in when I'm watching movies and television is authorship. What's the most important thing to me? What I want to know is the creator of this show, and that's Jon Favreau, doing what he set out to do? And I think the answer to that question is yes, because I see The Mandalorian as being two things. I think Jon Favreau, the way George Lucas embraced classic samurai movies of Kurosawa or movies like The Hidden Fortress and Seven Samurai, Favreau has gone back to well-worn Western tropes and just wanted to take his whole... In a way, and this is kind of it's not really elite, but you know what it reminds me of? It reminds me of Lawrence Kasdan's 1985 Western, Silverado. Lawrence Kasdan, who obviously wrote Empire and Jedi and Raiders of the Lost Ark and The Force Awakens with J.J. Abrams. Silverado covered no new ground. None. It was all of these old Western tropes brought together with a lot of great character actors. It was just a delightful, fun update of the classic Western. And I really loved it. And I realized, I think, with episode 4, as I'm thinking about it and reading the different responses, and I know there's a lot of people in the industry, people that I very much admire, who have been, they're very critical of The Mandalorian. But I'm looking at it the same way I looked at Silverado, which I loved. It is totally a classical Western using the Star Wars milieu to tell its tale. And is it groundbreaking? No, at least not yet. I mean, yeah, there's a little lone wolf and cub. Baby Yoda is Daigoro. I've talked about that. But what I really think is interesting is for a generation of people, especially younger people, who are not watching Westerns. Who watches Westerns anymore? Everyone knows, they hear, the Clint Eastwood Man with No Name movies. But how many people have really watched A Fistful of Dollars for a Few Dollars More and The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly? How many people have watched High Plains Drifter? How many people have watched Stagecoach or the other movies that My Darling Clementine, classic Westerns? Are people watching those these days? I don't know. But I'll tell you what they are doing. They're watching The Mandalorian. They're watching classic Western tropes in the Star Wars universe, which I think is pretty damn Star Wars. So as much as The Mandalorian might not be covering any new ground, and I admit it's very surfacey in its approach, I find it enjoyable, and I don't find it insulting to my intelligence. I think it's really interesting. I like the relationships they've had. I've really been enjoying the show, and at these 30 or 30 plus minute bites, I think it's pretty cool. And I think that sometimes in the case of something like The Mandalorian, the simplicity is actually working for the show. And isn't that okay? Like, I know we all want, what people really want? Here's what people really want. Let me tell you what people really want when it comes to Star Wars. People want to feel when they watch Star Wars like they feel when they watched Lord of the Rings. When you watch Lord of the Rings, if you watch all 3 of those movies, they were emotional. First of all, they're epic fantasy, so you're transported to the world of Middle-earth. You want to be transported to the world of Star Wars. What you want is you want the story and the characters to resonate with you as much as Lord of the Rings does. And because Lord of the Rings is sourced from literary material, the story was already laid out. It was already there. So it took somebody like Peter Jackson and Ralph Bakshi before them to make a movie like the Lord of the Rings franchise. And I think what people want, and what we've never received, is a Star Wars trilogy that was already conceived before it was made. You want to have a story that's as tight and resonant with characters that are as richly drawn as they are in Lord of the Rings. They certainly were in Star Wars and Empire. And I think the real problem with Return of the Jedi, at least for me, was that at the end of the day, Return of the Jedi was kind of a rehash of what we've already seen before. And it didn't realize the promise that we were promised by Empire Strikes Back. Now, that said, I do think the Emperor's throne room sequence, where Vader and Luke and the Emperor confront one another, is marvelous. I think it's marvelous. But then the rest of the film, there's another Death Star, which wasn't new. The Ewoks weren't the Wookiees like they were supposed to be. So the film did not get as deep. The stakes weren't as great as we wanted them to be. And I think the thing about the prequel trilogy is it could have been that way, but the rest of the movie just wasn't as good as we wanted it to be. The story was there. I've often said the prequels are bad movies, but good Star Wars. And I stand by that. And I think what we really want and what we wanted for this new, which is interesting because we live in a post-Lord of the Rings world. We live in a Game of Thrones world. We live in a world where, look at the 8th. To me, Return of the Jedi is the 8th season of Game of Thrones. But it's not like there's not stuff to like now. But when I first saw it when I was 16, it was hugely disappointing to me. And the thing is, though, unfortunately, with the risk that Disney took, they already spent $4 billion. And if you're going to spend money to make all 3 Star Wars movies at one time, which, by the way, I don't know why they didn't. I don't know, honestly, why the Star Wars sequel trilogy was not approached the way Lord of the Rings was approached, where the 3 movies should have been written already and they were all shot at one time. I don't understand. I understand the economics of that, and I understand how Hollywood works. And for Disney to already spend $4 billion, if you were going to make 3 more Star Wars movies all at one time, you're looking at a production cost that was going to be hideously expensive. Dare I say, I would say if you were going to do that, you're going to be probably pushing $300 million for budgets of each one of those films together. And I think that would have made the risk go up to $5 billion if they were going to approach it that way. But I think in a post-Lord of the Rings world, when you know you're making a Star Wars trilogy, I think one of the things they should have done was write and make that trilogy all at one time. And they should have done what they did with the Lord of the Rings movies, release 1 movie every year. I think they should have done that. I really don't understand. I mean, look, from an economic standpoint, I know exactly why they didn't do that, because that worked once. That worked one time in Hollywood history. Bob Shaye at New Line took a massive risk. And while they were making those movies, it wasn't apparent that it was going to be successful. And Bob Iger, when you're a publicly held company and you've already spent $4 billion on Star Wars, he had to hedge his bets. If Force Awakens hadn't worked, and it worked like gangbusters, it would have been a real problem for Disney. And I think all the people and all the fans that bitch and moan and complain don't understand the enormous risks that every one of these Star Wars movies represents to the publicly held company that Disney is. They're not even out of the woods yet. The $4 billion expenditure that they've made, and don't forget all the money they've spent on the Star Wars movies. Let's just say conservatively that what they've spent on marketing the movies and putting those movies out, let's call it, well, we've now got, this will be The Rise of Skywalker, will be the 5th movie. So 5 movies, let's just say they all cost conservatively to make, let's call it $300 million, although I bet it was more. I bet it was like, for advertising as well, let's say $500 million. Probably not a lot, not as much as that, but for the sake of argument, now let's make it $400 million. To make and market each Star Wars movie, let's call it $400 million a film. Conservatively. $200 million to make each one, $200 million to market each one. Let's just call it that. So now you're into $5.2 million of $5.2 billion of investment. All right. Now, that's a lot of money. That's a lot of money for any publicly held company. It really is. And when you think about that kind of risk, if they were trying to make, if Force Awakens wasn't successful and didn't make $2 billion, which was a pretty big dent in that $2 billion. That was a pretty big dent in that $5 billion expenditure. All right. But it still doesn't get you out of the woods. As in Hollywood, we all want, what Hollywood studios will tell you is that a movie has to make 3 times what it cost in order to be considered profitable. That means that Bob Iger, based on my $400 million a movie, well, if it's $400 million movie with this Last Jedi, it's actually 5.5. It's 5.6 billion. So it's got to be 5.6 times 3 to show a real return. And they're not there yet. For all of the marketing, that's a long way they have to go. And if they had to put up that money up front, that means before Force Awakens had come out under my scenario, it means they would have had to have spent they hadn't made for the 3 movies. It would have been actually 400. So it would have been, it would have been 5.2 billion, right there because it's 400 million times 3. So if they were going to do that, they were way behind the 8 ball. My math is off, by the way. I keep forgetting there's 5 now. Anyway, if they're going to make a trilogy and each one of those movies was going to be 400 million in expenditure and they were going to make them all at once, that means it would have been a $5.2 billion investment before there was even any return. That's rough. So they couldn't have done that. They had to make only one movie. And luckily that one movie, The Force Awakens, made a lot of money. So I'll tell you, Kathleen Kennedy was installed as the head of Lucasfilm, and the riskiest proposition, you might say that before Lucasfilm was purchased, and people would say, Star Wars wasn't a risky proposition. At that much money it was. Spending that much money, it was a risky proposition. Anyway, my one point is I'm falling into the weeds here. I'm losing my train of thought. I think The Mandalorian is enjoyable, and I like it because it's what Jon Favreau set out to make. And, whether you think it's a little too simplistic, you wanted something with more depth, I'm sure as they branch out, and The Mandalorian has worked, it's become the #1 streaming show of all time, it's going to allow Disney to breathe a sigh of relief. And for the Obi-Wan Kenobi series, they're going to go into it and probably pull out all the stops. The Cassian Andor series will probably be better than we thought it was going to be because they know where they're going to be. But I think what they're really going to understand now, what Disney is going to, they're going to sort of ease back, and they realize the important thing about these movies is authorship. And they have to get filmmakers involved like Jon Favreau, with the assistance of Dave Filoni. By the way, I keep seeing this tweet that Dave Filoni and Jon Favreau, we were making this and Kathleen Kennedy didn't even know what we were making. If you believe that, you're insane, because you think Kathleen Kennedy wasn't overseeing this show every step of the way. It was her idea to put Filoni and Favreau together. Also, what's really interesting, and I think the most interesting thing about The Mandalorian, is that they are doing research and development about how to make Star Wars much cheaper. If you can shoot this entire show in a warehouse in Manhattan Beach and then maybe go out on location a couple of times, if they even went out on location, I'm not sure. But it looked like they did, but maybe that's how good the technology is. The Mandalorian is a test bed for the next 10 years of making a lot more Star Wars and not having to break the bank to do it. So I think The Mandalorian is an epic win for Star Wars fans and for the future of Star Wars. I really do. And I'm excited about it. And, I think it's pretty cool that you can already pre-order the heavy Mandalorian figure from Hot Toys. Obviously, people are thinking ahead. Why there's no Baby Yoda toy from Hot Toys yet that comes in the floating crib, I don't know. And I'm really bummed out that floating crib was left back on that Outer Rim planet. I think there's got to be a new floating crib. And like Daiguro's baby card from the Lone Wolf and Cub series, I want a floating crib that's like James Bond's Aston Martin DB5, where little baby Yoda can press things and missiles fire and laser beams fire and all kinds of things come out of that crib. That's what I want. That's what I want. That's my dream, Ray Kinsella. That's my dream. So anyway, that's my thoughts on The Mandalorian today. And that was things I wanted to read. So there you go. I don't know who's here. I don't know if people, we got a lot of people in the room today. 238 people. Let's see what people are firing in. A lot of people are firing in a lot of things. Caladia? Yeah, Caladia. Rob, your Yeti mic, is my Yeti mic down? It looks okay to me. Hang on. I seem to think that, let me check. Is it down? Doesn't look like it's down. It seems to be still showing up. Maybe I'm sitting. Is this better now? Timbula the Spider Monkey says, RMB, don't buy yourself stuff in December. Also, RMB, here's a cool website that has Black Phillip t-shirts. Conflicting information. Hey, look, man. Tim, I didn't tell you that you should buy them yourself. Tell somebody. What better Christmas stocking stuffer is there than a Black Phillip sweatshirt? Nothing screams the Christmas season like Black Phillip, the demonic goat from the movie The Witch. I mean, come on. Better yet, what you should do is buy Baby Yoda t-shirts and Black Phillip t-shirts and give them to people at the same time. I mean, what does that say to your family and friends? Lee Cameron says, should I go out drinking tonight or not? I'm a 20-year-old single dude from the UK, but what would you do, Rob, at this age? You're an awesome dude. Lee, if I get a chance to either go out and drink or stay home, I always go out and drink. And I'll tell you why. You should always. This is a very important lesson I learned. I'll tell you when I learned this lesson. I think I've talked about it before. But when I was growing up, when I was in high school, I would, if somebody was throwing a high school party, and I had lots of friends in high school. I was a very social guy. As a matter of fact, when I was 16, I used to bring booze and new releases and pornography to the upperclassmen whenever they threw parties, because when I was working at video stores in the early 80s, everybody who worked at video stores was older. So I used to take orders from people in my high school of what booze they wanted. I charged a 20% markup. So if you wanted $10 worth of beer, you had to give me $12. And usually on the weekends, I would have hundreds of dollars worth of booze in my car, and I'd usually have to take it to 3 or 4 parties, and I would deliver a new release movie. And of course, in the early 80s, everybody wanted a porn film as well. And then I made money. But I wouldn't necessarily hang out the parties myself because I'd want to go see a new release movie. So sometimes I would, but sometimes, most of the time, I didn't. There was a marathon of Star Trek, Star Trek Motion Picture, Star Trek 2, and Star Trek 3 once, and I went and saw them in 70 millimeter at the Lewis and Clark Theater rather than go to a high school party that one of my good friends was throwing. And I'm like, dude, they're showing all 3 Star Trek movies in 70 millimeter in the theater. My friend's like, come on, dude, you got to come by. And I'm like, no, dude, going to see Star Trek. So I would most of the time, well, not all the time, but a lot of the time, I wouldn't go out. I'd rather build a model, read a book, or just stay up, copy videotapes, or whatever I was doing, until I was between my junior and senior year, I was on the student government. And in Washington State, they had this thing during the summer that if you were going to be in student government, you could go to leadership camp, where it was a summer camp, but it was for future leaders. And I met people from all over the state, and everybody from the state. I met all these really interesting people. And afterwards, I made this decision. I was like, you know what? If anybody that I'm meeting at leadership camp calls me up during my senior year, like to go out, hang out for the weekend, wherever I had to drive, I'm like, I'm going to go. Let's just say that was a very wise decision. Because when you're a senior in high school and you're going to meet a lot of new and interesting people that you don't know, and there's alcohol involved, let's just say that there's experiences that I'm glad I had. So I always say, even now, as I'm middle-aged and I'm one foot in the grave, I always say, if you're not working, and I work a lot, so I can never go places or do things or whatever, but my advice to you, sir, as a 20-year-old, always go places, always go do things, because life will happen to you when you're out. Life will not happen to you when you're home. And sometimes maybe it will, but for the most part, and my late great friend Sean Fanning, especially in the 90s, my friend Sean Fanning and I used to go out all the time, and he had a saying. And his saying was, hey man, whatever comes our way. And that meant that we're going to go out, we're going to go do things, and we're going to see what we can make of our evening. We never expected it to come to us. Remember, this is before social media, so nobody could send you places. So if you went to a house party or you went to a bar, like we love to go to bars we'd never heard of before, like let's look up a bar in LA and go there. Our modus operandi was wherever we would go to, we would make the fun if the fun already wasn't happening. So his saying was, whatever comes our way, we're going to make the most of it. That's what he meant. And it was a good way to live.
Everyone's saying your mic is down.
You can't hear me at all?
I mean, I can hear you.
Well, you can hear me. Okay. I'm seeing it on the thing, though.
Well, we're also saying it's down.
Uh-oh. Like, no one, you can't hear me at all? Well, hang on, people. Okay, that's so odd. Hang on, maybe my input's down. Let me check. See, I can't change my system preferences when I'm already up. No?
Everyone's saying they can hear you now, so I don't know.
You can hear me now. You can hear me now.
Keep going.
I'll just keep going. Anyway, where was I? I was pontificating. Long story short, what you should do is always go out and have fun, because you never know what's going to happen. So as a 20-year-old single dude, Lee, plus you're a 20-year-old single dude in the UK. You're now, you didn't say whether you were straight or gay, but all I can tell you is that the UK has a lot. It's a cosmopolitan place. You've got girls and guys of every shape, size, color, creed. They speak different languages. And by the way, you've all got accents, which means you're all smarter than Americans, because we think that everybody with a British accent is smarter than we are. I know someone's going to throw some Cockney rhyming slang at me and say that's not true, but go with it, man. Lee, I want you to go out. Not only do I want you to go out, I want you to report back what happened to you when you went out drinking tonight. By the way, shouldn't you already be out? I think you should. Roberto Suarez is here. Brian K. Vaughan's Saga would be a great series or movie. The animators doing Dragon Prince for Netflix would be great for it. For those of you who aren't on Dragon Prince, I have not seen it, but a lot of people are talking about how great it is. I think you should check it out. I think you should absolutely check out Dragon Prince. But I think Brian K. Vaughan's Saga is an incredible comic book. It started out real strong, and then it got a little less strong. But if you haven't read Saga, Brian K. Vaughan did like Ex Machina, and he did Why the Last Man, and he was a writer, by the way, on Lost. Check it out. Haskell 420 says, "Hey Rob, just double check. The Last Jedi is on Netflix." Oh, okay. Well, then I don't have to put my disc in. But you know what? If I put my disc in, I can listen to it. The surround sound is better. So anyway, there you go. Let's see. Little Nate ain't. I love Little Nate ain't here. Little Nate here. So far, I'm loving The Mandalorian. By the way, Little Nate ain't. Thank you for supporting the channel. Very much appreciate that. And thanks to all of you who are supporting the channel. And very much thank you. Little Nate here. So far, I'm loving The Mandalorian. I can't wait for the second half. I'm sure we'll get a payoff we all want, such as more Baby Yoda force using and returning favorite characters. If not, hopefully in season 2. Yeah, you never know who might show up in The Mandalorian. And Baby Yoda, I want to see Baby Yoda wreck shop. I mean, clearly Baby Yoda knows how to use the Force. And, Baby Yoda is supposed to be 50 years old. Maybe Baby Yoda just doesn't have anything to say yet. I think Baby Yoda is the secret of the show. And I think we're going to see Baby Yoda really wield the Force at some point. Zachary King says, "Have you seen the movies that made us on Netflix? All were great, but I especially loved the Die Hard episode. McTiernan came off as a real jerk." Okay, Zach. First of all, I've watched 2 episodes. Elizabeth and I watched 2 episodes of the movies that made us. For those of you who don't know, the 3rd season of the Netflix series, The Toys That Made Us, dropped. And the same production team that made The Toys That Made Us have made a new series that dropped on Netflix, I think on Friday. I think it dropped yesterday, called The Movies That Made Us. And like with The Toys That Made Us, they took 4 films and delved into their production history. And it's a pretty good show. As somebody, it's like a DVD special feature or Blu-ray special feature. It's really well done, just like The Toys That Made Us. It's very slick. They've got some really great interviews. Elizabeth and I did watch the Home Alone episode, and we watched the Die Hard episode. The other episodes are Dirty Dancing and Ghostbusters. And I really enjoyed it. They are doing all new interviews. And Zachary is correct. John McTiernan came off like a real sourpuss. But for those of you who don't know, John McTiernan, who he wrote and directed the movie Nomads that Pierce Brosnan was in. It's a horror film. And if you haven't seen Nomads, it's really interesting. Then he directed Predator, of course, and he directed Hunt for Red October. And he directed the remake of the Thomas Crown Affair. He also directed other films like Medicine Man, which isn't so good. I'm a big John McTiernan fan. But for those of you who don't know what happened to John McTiernan, he also directed The Last Action Hero. he went to jail. He was involved in the Anthony Pellicano case, which is, I won't get into all that now, but John McTiernan was in jail for quite some time, and it pretty much ended his Hollywood career. And the man, he did famously direct a video game ad. I want to say it was last year, but he's had a rough time. And, he was put in jail for, I don't exactly know. He paid off, he wanted to get dirt on the producer. It was because of the Rollerball remake that he also directed, yeesh. So he was in jail, and I believe he's become quite embittered, and I can understand why. And he really came off in that episode like a sourpuss. And I was on the set actually of The Last Action Hero. I was friends back in the day with his assistant at the time, and he would bring us down to set when they were shooting on the lot down to what is now the Sony lot. And met him a couple times, and it was dynamic to watch him work, and it was a lot of fun. So yeah, the Die Hard episode's really, really good. Reginald VelJohnson was on it. They interviewed him. They interviewed Argyle. It was good. I liked it. Rick Berg is here. Rick Berg says, instant gratification in fandom is dangerous. We all need to let the story evolve. Yeah, I agree. We all need to let the story evolve, but we live now in a world where everybody is making these split decisions or instant decisions about whether or not this I either love this or I hate it. Everybody has to know. It's so weird. Like you can't think something's pretty good or I liked it. It's good. I'm seeing all these hot takes on The Irishman now, and people are like, well, it's boring, and I'm like, boring? You're boring. Try and watch on Antonioni's Ennui trilogy. By the way, I've made that challenge to all of my viewers out there. I've said I want you to all to watch La Notte, La Ventura, and The Eclipse, and get back to me. And nobody's done it yet. I know. I'm not putting you all down. I'm just saying, it's things are different. The world can be a different place. It depends on what you're watching. And I agree, Rick. Everybody wants instant gratification. Instant gratification, if that's what you're looking for, your soul will be emptied out, and eventually you'll be left with nothing. You can't get instant gratification with everything. Instant gratification is not necessarily the best thing. And that's why I think the fact that The Mandalorian is coming out on a weekly basis is a lot of fun. I've enjoyed it. I've got this new Friday routine. Not only do I feed the dogs before going to the John Campea show, not only do I brew coffee and play barista for Elizabeth, we get to sit down with our piping hot cups of coffee in our hands, and we get to enjoy our Mandalorian together. It's like a date morning. It's pretty cool. And then, of course, I never have a chance to take a shower because it's always too late, and I have to rush to John's. But that's okay. It's a new thing, and I've enjoyed it. I've enjoyed the fact. I think the key to binging is great when all the shows are available. But there's something to be said for having it given out to us every week. You can stretch out that delight and enjoyment for 8 weeks. In the case of The Mandalorian, I like that. I think that's good. Or you've got, what's really great is the 7th episode of The Mando drops on December 13th. Then the next week there's no Mandalorian episode. There's the Rise of Skywalker opening, and then on December 27th we get the final episode of The Mandalorian. And that's pretty damn cool. Stephen Foley is here. Stephen Foley says, hey, Rob, I love this episode of The Mando. I'm hearing some hate, but I thought Bryce Dallas Howard did an amazing job bringing the heart out of the man in the mask. Stephen Foley, I am with you 100%. For those of you who don't know, Ron Howard's daughter, Bryce Dallas Howard, directed this week's episode of The Mandalorian. Also, once again, written by Jon Favreau. And everyone knows I like redheads, so I'm a fan of Bryce Dallas Howard's. But what I really thought she was doing in this episode was really interesting. Of course, she starred in the last 2 Jurassic World movies. I liked the fact that she turned an AT-ST into a dinosaur. It was kind of neat the way she used the tree line. I mean, look, was this a big stretch? No. But I really thought it was really, hey, she's the first legacy Star Wars director, I think. Her father obviously came in and directed Solo, and Ron Howard's been directing movies for 40 years. And it was pretty cool to see it run in the family and to see in my mind, a new female directorial voice we saw emerging out of that episode. And I thought she and with Deborah Chow doing episode 3, and then Bryce Dallas Howard doing episode 4. Everybody's talking about, for we're going to have more female directors. There are not a lot of female directors in Hollywood, and seeing female voices showing that they can equip themselves admirably directing what has inherently been a man's arena, which is Star Wars, to watch women come in and kick ass as directors, pretty cool, and sure, people might say, oh, scream nepotism, but you know what? Bryce Dallas Howard obviously has been learning from the best. I thought, did a great job directing this episode. I thought it was great. And, Jon Favreau has been writing this show exactly the way he wants it. So it's got authorship, and that's why I like it. I think it's great. So, Stephen, I am with you about The Mandalorian. I'm thoroughly enjoying the show, even though would I like it to be deeper? Of course I would, but it's not necessarily rocket science or anything like that. Dieter Bastian says, hey, Rob, I got the new RoboCop Blu-ray in front of me, and the back lists your friend Lucas Kendall in the bonus section about the score of the movie. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, the new Arrow release of RoboCop dropped this week, and I don't have it yet, but it's tasty. You got to get it. Everyone says it's the best version. My man, Zolly Becker, who to me is the end-all, be-all voice, even though he's delightfully crazy. He knows his stuff, and even he was talking about how great the transfer is. And if the transfer is good enough for Zolly Becker to give his seal of approval, it's got to be a damn good transfer. I got to go to DVD Beaver and see what the stats are on it, but I can't wait to get it. Arrow, by the way, has been crushing the physical media this year. They put out Friedkin's Cruising. They just put out the awesome box set of An American Werewolf in London. My God, they did a Mario Bava box set. They did. They've got one of my favorite science fiction movies of all time, Slaughterhouse-5, George Roy Hill's Slaughterhouse-5, based on the book by Kurt Vonnegut about Billy Pilgrim being unstuck in time with a topless Valerie Perrine. It is a fantastic film. If you have not seen Slaughterhouse-5, it's one of the very finest science fiction movies of the 70s, and I love it. They have been crushing it, so you got to get that. Congratulations, Dieter, for getting that. I'm glad you have it in front of you. I like when you write to me about physical media. Nicholas Pena says, have you been to Everett, Washington? Yes, I have, Nicholas. Many, many times. Of course, I grew up in Seattle. I grew up specifically on a place called on Mercer Island, Washington, which is notorious. It's very notorious now, but Paul Allen's encampment, the co-founder of Microsoft, was on Mercer Island. Yes, I'm from Mercer Island, Washington, and I've been to Everett many, many times. Yeah. Anthony Gonzalez asks, would John Bender get along with Mike Damone? Well, I think Anthony is subtly both testing me and asking a very interesting geek question. Your John Bender is, of course, a character in is a character in The Breakfast Club, whereas Mike Damone is a character in Fast Times at Ridgemont High. Would they get along? I think they would get along. I think Bender would buy tickets from Damone. I think ultimately Bender is probably a cooler character than Mike Damone. Mike Damone thinks he's cooler than he really is, but John Bender, I don't know, maybe, I can't say that. I think Mike Damone and John Bender might form a band if they were in a movie together. I think so. I think they get along. The Richard is here. The Richard says, speaking of drinking, I went to film school in London, and every day our teacher would break and take us across the street for a pint or a few at the pub. We came back relaxed and creative. You know what? If I could have gone to film school in London and the teacher would break and we could all drink pints of beer, that would have been an incredible film school experience. So, the Richard, I'm glad you had that experience, and I envy you. I didn't know you went to film school in London. That's very interesting. Willow Yang says, would you try the watermelon trick from The Irishman? I'm curious to know if it works. Wait a minute. You want me to try it? Hey, Gilbert. What's up, buddy? How you doing? You're back? I already gave you a cookie. Okay, you want one of these other organic treats? The duck treat? You come in right when I'm talking about food. See, you guys just know. You just know. You can have that. No, Tallulah, I won't leave you out. You can have that. Now, don't bother me when I'm on. These dogs, man, they know I'm a pushover. They get treats when I'm once a day. So here's the thing. What Willow Yang is referring to, one of the characters in the Irishman, they're going to meet with Jimmy Hoffa. And Jimmy Hoffa hates watermelon, and he also doesn't like drinking. He's a teetotaler, so he doesn't drink. So one of the characters cuts a hole in the watermelon and takes a whole bottle of vodka and slams it into the watermelon so the vodka is absorbed into the watermelon. And then in the next scene, we see the two characters, one of them being Robert De Niro's character, eating watermelon that is soaked in vodka. Well, Willow, you and I park our shuttlecrafts in the same shuttle bay because I instantly wanted to try that trick out. I would totally do that. I don't know if it works. It must work. But how come you're asking me? Why don't you try it? I want to know what you think. I think it'd be very funny, and you should make a video. I know you're reluctant to show yourself, but I think what better way than to see if it works? And I'm waiting. Of course, everyone, for those of you who haven't read any of Willow's work or have listened to me wax rhapsodic about her letters that I read, you can go to the Burnettwork.net website and you can find the Willow Talk section and read her reviews of classic Star Trek episodes, Next Generation episodes, and sometimes she sends me stuff about science, and recently a must-read about SpongeBob SquarePants. But I really think that Willow should start making videos about her questions like this. Would the watermelon trick from The Irishman work? Well, Willow, as a scientist, I think you found your calling. You need to make like Mythbusters, but make it Pillow Talk with Willow. Pillow Talk with Willow, where you do videos where you see if stuff in movies and television actually works. Come on. I think all of you should encourage Willow in the chat and tell her she should do this. And we'll put it on the Burnettwork. I know it would be huge. You get way more likes. You get way more likes than these videos get. And hopefully you bolster my subscription base. It'd be great. And better yet, if you did two versions and you did one in English and then one in your native Chinese, we could have both versions of the video, kind of like when they shot the original Dracula in English and Spanish, or when Klaus Kinski's Nosferatu. Or maybe that wasn't shot in two versions. I thought it was, though. But yeah, how cool would that be? I'm telling you, videos like this would go through the roof. It'd be great. A real scientist, a real microbiologist getting her PhD, a real doctor, does the important things to find out if the watermelon trick from The Irishman works. I'm endorsing this. I'll figure out a way. We'll figure out a way to come up with a little budget for you to do it. Get on this, Willow. Do it. Do it now. Stephen Foley says, "Dude, is that the Beyonder behind you?" Schnepp introduced me. I don't know what you're looking at. There is no Beyonder here. There's Morgan Freeman from the Batman movies. I'm going to get this all lit up in the new set. You're going to see all of my hot toys. Well, not all of them, but most of them. There's Yoda over here. There's a Xenomorph over there. There's a Millennium Falcon. By the way, if you can't really see it. Here's V'ger from Star Trek: The Motion Picture that all the girls in this house think look like some kind of a sex toy, which offends me. There's a 22-inch Eagle from Space 1999. So there's no Beyonder. I think you're thinking about this. That's actually a hot toy of Jor-El from Superman the movie, but they made it for Superman Returns. And interestingly enough, this hot toy of Jor-El was never released in the United States. And I will say one of the cool things I like about Gary Beekler over at Nerdrotic is I've noticed Gary Beekler has that hot toy of Jor-El. It's a hot toy that you don't see much of, but it's there. Dan V900 says, "As I reflect on Knives Out, I dislike the third act more. It is sloppy and most of the cast is sidelined. It's too obvious who the culprit is, which defeats the point of the whodunit, and it isn't that clever." Well, Dan V900, I have not seen it yet, but that is a criticism I have seen leveled at the film. So you're in good company, but I don't know if that's correct or if I feel the same way. I've told Elizabeth we should go see it. I'd like to get out of the house and on this holiday weekend and go see more movies. Stephen Foley says, hey, thanks for talking about Mr. Nobody. Very overlooked film, in my opinion. Oh, my God, people. If you haven't seen a science fiction film called, well, it's a fantasy science fiction film, but it's a movie called Mr. Nobody. And it stars Jared Leto. And by the way, there's two versions. There's the standard theatrical release and there's the director's cut. If you haven't seen Mr. Nobody, you are missing out. It is a fantastic movie that deals with alternate timelines and the road less traveled. And Jared Leto plays an old man. He plays a young man. He plays multiple versions of himself. Mr. Nobody is easily one of my favorite science fiction films of the last 20 years. By the way, I'm going to do a video. I don't think I'm going to do it live, although I might. Maybe I will do it live. I should do every video, because every time I do a video, well, I haven't done one in a while, but where I don't do it live, people like, why didn't you do this live? I'm going to count down. I don't know if I'm going to do my top 20 or my top 25 favorite films of the decade. I'm going to do that next month, but I've already been compiling it. And I know that I've complained. I mean, I got so much pushback on this one. I'm like, look, man, it's 1 to 10. So the decade really ends in 2020. You know what? And I'm like, that's why Kubrick called this movie 2001, because 2001 is the first year of the new millennium. No one listens to me. People are like, the decade ends 2019. So it's, look, you count 1 to 10, but apparently, not when it comes to decades. Everyone's like, nope, it's 2010 to 2019, and that's over. I mean, that to me is weird. But that's only because I love 2001. So anyway, 2019, we get to 2020. It's a new decade. So we're supposed to count down the 10 movies from 2020 to 2029. So now we have to do 2010 to 2019. Okay. So I'll do that. I'm going to do that. I'm going to have my list of 25 favorite movies or 20 favorite movies. I haven't decided yet. If I need more, I will. But I'll do that. And I'm also going to do a video of, so that's all I'm going to talk about. I'm not going to read letters. And by the way, I got letters to read. I'm going to talk about my favorite movies. And then I'm also going to do a video about my favorite physical media releases, of which you just got a preview of 2019. There's been a lot of great physical media releases this year. I've been very excited. By the way, you know what I just scored from Germany, from Deutschland, Dieter? Lorenzo's Oil. George Miller, who directed The Road Warrior. Lorenzo's Oil came out in Germany, and I was able to get this Blu-ray from Deutschland, from Amazon Deutschland. So, so I'm very excited about that. That was something I've been waiting to get. Fantastic movie if you've never seen it. Such a great, great film. Very excited to have it. But yes, Mr. Nobody, you got to watch it. Everybody should watch it. The Richard says, on my wish list, absolutely, is the Phantasm Steelbook. Well, as everyone knows, Phantasm is one of my favorite little horror movies of all time. I have, Elizabeth would tell you, I have 2 box sets of Phantasm. I have both the Well Go USA box set they already released on Blu-ray, and I have the Arrow, the outstanding Arrow box set that comes with a Silver Sphere. And everyone also knows they're releasing another box set with a Silver Sphere and a Phantasm Steelbook. I don't know if I'm going to bust on those yet. I probably have to, just because it's Phantasm. So maybe. But yeah, there's great stuff coming out. I know that those other box sets sold out very quickly. The Arrow box sets, if you're a physical media fan, the Arrow box sets go very, very fast. And if you don't get them, it's a bummer. It's a bummer if you don't get them. I have letters, and I've got one from Brian Eng. Brian Eng says, if you could make a living off super chats, would you still pursue your movie making dreams? Super chats are great, and talking is great. And I do appreciate the support that people give to me and give to the channel and give to the website, which is great. But yes, I mean, I would absolutely pursue my movie making dreams. I mean, I think, look, the only thing that I have that makes me different from any other online pundit is that I'm actually making films. And some people are going to say, yeah, but you're not making Star Wars. Well, that's true. And Tango Shalom is a low budget movie. But I will say this. On January 23rd, Lucas Kendall's short Skyfighter that I edited and I've worked on for the last year and a half. Oh, not constantly, but it was a 15-minute short film that was very effects heavy, and I'm proud of the work. And Lucas was able to get it to the Dust Network, and they accepted it. So there's some filmmaking work, and right now we're waiting to hear back from Cast. It's out to Cast to make the feature. Hopefully, Lucas has said I would be asked back to edit the film, the feature. I'd hope that would happen, because that was the whole point of doing the short in the first place. And we're wrapping up Tango Shalom, and we got a little bit more to do. So my filmmaking is what sort of keeps me going, and it keeps me, I think, that really, I don't know if I could sit here and pontificate for hundreds of hours if I wasn't actually really making movies. I would feel like a fraud. Now, here's the thing. That's just me. I'm not saying that anybody who doesn't make movies isn't worthy of being on YouTube, because I don't think that's true either. I think one of the great things about the YouTube platform is that it's given everybody a voice. And I love listening to people like, I watch Jeremy Johns' reviews. I really like Chris Stuckman's reviews. And these are guys that have spent a long time. I mean, Jeremy Johns used to be a projectionist. He knows his movies. So does Chris Stuckman. A lot of my people, my fellow, my peeps at the movie trivia Schmodown, the Schmodown Entertainment Network, all people I really love. But for me personally, if I hadn't worked in the business and I hadn't spent 30 years first as a PA and then working at a movie studio, and look, have I had great commercial success? No. Would I have liked to be much, much richer? Sure. But I have found that talking on the internet has given me, it keeps me going. As I'm approaching the twilight years of my life with one foot in my grave, talking on the internet has definitely put a spring in my step, as it were. Now, I don't have the biggest audience in the world. I'd certainly like to have more of an audience, because, John Campea, his show, he does it full time, and he makes a really good living on his show. He does a really good job. And a lot of people don't understand, they're like, oh, YouTube isn't work. But it really is. I mean, John works 10 hours a day on his show, on his channel. He really does. Not just when he does show notes, he does graphics. He's constantly buying and updating his equipment. And John, it is full time for him. And I know there's some YouTubers that really make it work for them. But for me, even if I was making real substantial money, like 30, 40, 50 grand a month, like some people do, like if I had PewDiePie money, it would be a full-time job. I don't think I could make enough money to live on unless I made it full-time. It's great, but super chats and all that, those are great, and they support the channel and they make it worthwhile, and they do help. They do help. The website is not inexpensive to maintain, and what I really want to do is I don't pay my moderators, and honestly, I would like to be able to. I'd like to reach a point where they should get paid. John has people on staff, and I'm one of them, and he pays us. And I would love to be able to. What I would really like to do is for the channel to be self-sustaining and pay. My moderators, it bothers me that I don't pay the moderators, and they deserve to get paid, and because they're working. And sometimes I talk for 2.5 hours, and they put in as much time as I do, and they should get paid. But I don't remember that the super chats, they take 30% for super chats. John has this new tip jar, which is better because people can donate 24/7, which is good. But my movie making, I have to have a project. I've been telling Elizabeth, I'm like, once Skyfighter and Tango, I've had Tango Shalom now for years, been working on it for years. And once it's done, I need a new project. And I haven't not had a project to work on. I've always had something I've worked on. And over the last decade, at first it was Free Enterprise 2, and that went down. And then I directed 5 episodes of Femme Fatales, and then I got the Star Trek the Next Generation documentaries for 3 years. And then I went and edited a movie called Paradox for my friend Mike Hurst that was on Netflix for a long time. And then I did a movie for Lifetime for my friend Darren Scott, who directed Tales from the Hood and now has Tales from the Hood 3 coming, called I Know Where Lizzie Is. Then I jumped on Tango Shalom, and I was working on Axanar, and now I've got Skyfighter, the short, coming out next month or January, and Tango Shalom. I don't know when it's going to come out. It's not entirely done, but it keeps me going, man. And if I didn't have a project, I'd probably make one up. I've got a lot of other projects that are percolating that I've been trying to get made, like the Living in Infamy TV series or movie that we almost had made. But there's a lot going on, so I'd have to keep it going. But that's a good question, Brian. I mean, it's a really interesting question. Speaking of Rick Berg, who is here, Rick Berg sent me a letter. Rick Berg says, "Greetings, y'all. I want to write a short letter expressing thank you. I have so much fun here on the old Burnettwork." Yep. The Burnettwork works for me. I was thinking that when you move into your new studio that we call it the Cave of Wonders or Shuttle Bay 6. Everyone chime in and let's all have fun with the name. With respect, Rick Berg, steady as she goes. Rick, I think that is a phenomenal idea. I was just calling it the Imaginarium. Basically, to know it's a garage that I'm putting all its basically it was a storage area, but I'm turning it into a set like where John shoots. Hopefully it's a little bigger, but I want to have, like, I'm surrounded by everything. There's a bunch of books, graphic novels. I mean, it's pretty extensive. It's full up, chock-a-block full of stuff. I'll have hot toy figures. It'll just be better, and I'll be surrounded. I won't be here in the laundry room between the kitchen and my bedroom. It'll be cooler. It'll be colorful, and I'll have a couch, and people can come in, and it'll be set up where I can have guests. And I think what I'd like to turn this into is sort of a cross between what I'm doing now and something like Joe Rogan, because if I don't have a project, I could do this more full time, and I'd like to do like more videos, like more short videos, and talk about things. And so, yeah, Rick, I'm going to leave that to you. Well, if you want, what should I call the set that I'm going to be on? Remember, we're 14 days away. We're 14 shows away from being on that set. So what should I call it? I love this idea, Rick. This is why I love you guys, because who knows what it's going to be called. I don't know. Paul Stutz sent me a letter and said, "I just wanted to say I listened to your detailed explanation of the Snyder Cut, and I wanted to thank you for an excellent job. I thoroughly enjoyed your presentation. Great job on your YouTube broadcasts, Paul Stutz." Paul, thank you, man. I appreciate that. You know, that's another thing that I think that I'm able to offer. There's going to be a lot of cynics that are like, "Ugh, how successful were you in the film business?" Look, I'm still here. I've done a lot, and I've had a really good time, and I've had a lot of great experiences in the film business. I just haven't had that breakthrough commercial success that has given me total legitimacy. But I have had a lot of experience in the film business, and I enjoy that. And I'm glad I was able to bring, it's very funny. And I've kind of enjoyed trolling people in a way, I got to say it. But the Snyder Cut people, on one hand, I really love the fact that people who want to see the Snyder Cut, and by the way, I want to see the Snyder Cut. I like what Zack Snyder did with a lot of the work that he's done and a lot of his adaptations. I'm a big defender of Man of Steel, and I would love to see his a 3 hour and 14-minute version of Justice League or whatever his cut is. And I'm like, on the other hand, I'm like, do you really think that there's a finished 3 hour and 14-minute cut of Justice League of America or the Justice League movie? No, there's not. Now, having a finished cut of a movie is not the same as having a finished movie. Because when the reason why this is so important to understand is when you are working on an effects-heavy film, like Justice League, where so much of it, there's green screen elements. The reason why it's important to have a picture cut is because every visual effect is costing thousands, if not tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars. So you have to know how much money you're spending. So it's really important, and it's responsible as a filmmaker. You have a finished cut. I mean, look, that doesn't mean your cut can't be refined. If anything, you make it shorter. But the reason you have to have a finished cut is so you know how many visual effects you need to make. You know, and this idea that they finished all the visual effects, I think it's absurd, by the way. Zack Snyder, he had a horrible tragedy in his life. And if there was a cut of the film done before he left, they would have released that cut because it would have made no sense to do as many reshoots on the film as they did. But that's just me. At least that's what I would think. And I will say right now, I don't know. Everyone's like, all evidence to the contrary. What evidence? You've had people talk about what they think. But man, you bring up the Snyder Cut on Twitter and so much. I've never been attacked about my opinion so much as I am about the Snyder Cut. For the record, love to see it. Love to see the Snyder Cut. Bring it on. I'd be the first in line. I'd be the first to buy it on 4K. I would love to see the Snyder Cut just as much as anyone else, I think. Another letter from our man Ian Samuels, another man in the UK. Rob, how the Crown done dirty on Princess Anne and the England football team. I've not watched The Crown Season 3. I only saw episodes from Season 1. The Crown Season 3 felt very much like an introduction to the new cast with a few events dotted through the period 1964 through 1978. Certain important events got a vague mention where others were completely skipped over. You would have thought that the Queen's Silver Jubilee in 1977 was such an important event that it would get its own episode rather than just a mention. Also, in the same year, a further historical event occurred, sharing the Jubilee year. English tennis player Virginia Wade won Wimbledon, the only English woman to have done so since Anne Jones in 1969. It meant a lot for England to have a woman Wimbledon champion the same year as the Queen's Jubilee. No mention. Back in 1966, England was host to the World Football Cup, and England won. And the Queen awarded the Jules Rimet Trophy, the World Cup of the time, to England captain Bobby Moore. All completely glossed over. Even more disgusting than those events ignored are events directly involving a member of the royal family, the Queen's own daughter, Princess Anne. In 1973, she married to Captain Mark Phillips. In 1974, there was an attempted kidnapping of Princess Anne. Why were these events ignored? It seems that Season 3 was just an introduction for the new cast and was rushed through to Season 4, where they will be beginning the story of Princess Diana, which they seem to think is what everyone wants. This seems an awful insult to Princess Anne. Ian Samuels. Well, Ian, I didn't know any of that. I can't speak to that, not being a citizen of the Crown, but I'm not a UK citizen, but that's interesting. I didn't know that. I wondered, do you guys feel the same way? Do my fellow my friends across the pond feel that the show is doing them dirty? I don't know, but it's interesting that you have to say that. I did not know that. So that's interesting. How do you guys feel? How do you feel about it? I don't know. Stephen Foley says, top 5, Rob, for this year: Parasite, Jojo Rabbit, Peanut Butter Falcon, Ford versus Ferrari, and Joker. I haven't seen all those films yet, but that seems like a very respectable list for me. Absolutely. I think Parasite's probably going to win Best Foreign Film this year, but a good list. Alexander Wilson is there. Alexander, once again, thank you for supporting the channel. I can't thank you enough. You're a good man. Alexander Wilson says, a DC reporter went undercover at a Russell Buffalino dinner in the 80s and said there were some powerful people there, and he got scared and bolted the dinner. The FBI was outside. If they weren't there, he would have been dead. Wow, is that true? That's interesting. Of course, Russell Buffalino is who Joe Pesci plays in The Irishman, and my God, does he knock it out of the park. Wow, I didn't know that. That's really interesting. You know, one of the things, it's very funny to me that there has been this, people they're acting like The Irishman was supposed to, it's not as good as Goodfellas or Casino or whatever, and how boring it is. But I was completely fascinated. Of course, there is question as to the veracity of the original book. I Know You Paint Houses, that whether it's all true or not. And so one of the things that I found really interesting about The Irishman is how it's all about American history. I mean, it spans a 50-year period of time. And as I talked about before, one of my dad's really good friends was head of the Hollywood Teamsters, a man named Earl Bush. And I heard lots of Teamster stories, and my dad would tell me stories. And meeting Earl Bush, he was like a character out of Central Casting. He was such a great guy to talk to, but he looked like the Southern California version of a character from a Martin Scorsese movie. And I think I think that the history of The Irishman is sort of lost on a lot of people. I mean, they do come out and say in the voiceover, De Niro talks about how Jimmy Hoffa was, of course, like a rock star. And even Willow Yang, lovely Willow Yang, asked the other day, she asked, did you know who Jimmy Hoffa was growing up? And yes, I mean, Jimmy Hoffa was a figure, and his disappearance is one of the great unsolved mysteries. I mean, people used to say that his body was poured into concrete and it was left in the foundation of an office building somewhere. I mean, this movie basically comes out and says our main character, who's, as somebody pointed out, like the movie Zelig, Woody Allen's Zelig, that that Robert De Niro's character was like the Zelig of American history as far as the mob was concerned, because he was at all these key events. Now, I don't know how truthful it is, and whether it's realistic or not. I don't know. We don't know. It was in the book, of course, but Sheeran was he not Sheeran, I'm thinking Ed Sheeran. Was he actually at all of these events? Did he do all of these things? Well, I don't know. I mean, I guess when I was watching The Irishman, it really made me think of Oliver Stone's JFK. And Oliver Stone's JFK, he has said it's a myth. It's an American myth. Was it true? Was all these things true? I don't know. But I think it still works as if you want to consider The Irishman as another American myth, it delves into history. I found it endlessly fascinating and endlessly compelling. And the end of the movie, that really is very melancholy, and it really is I don't want to give any spoilers away, but you know, when you're left with the movie's over, you really ask yourself, what is it? I mean, obviously he certainly had a very interesting life. What does it all mean in the long run? I mean, where are we all left at the end of our lives? And where we're left is aging is a bitch, you know, and if you lose love and you lose family and you lose friendship, what are you left with at the end of your life? I mean, it asks those important questions. I, of course, will be surrounded by a lot of hot toys. So the old adage, he who dies with the most toys wins. Or, you know, maybe I'll have no hot toys and I'll just have Elizabeth, and I'll be just as content, and I'll be able to sail off to Valhalla or go to the Grey Havens with the elves, and I will have known that I was loved and I had a life well lived. And isn't that what matters? I mean, I plan, it'll be interesting. Elizabeth and I will be like 95, and what'll be great about streaming is I'll no longer be ambulatory, so I can't get up and change my Blu-rays anyway. Hopefully I will burn them all in some digitized format, but we'll be able to just watch streaming services. I plan that Elizabeth and I will be like the grandparents in Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, or Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory. We'll just never get out of bed. That's what Elizabeth and I will be. We'll have new dogs, and we'll just never get out of bed. And that's but when you're watching The Irishman, I thought it was a very interesting take. And it's so weird to me when people say things are boring, I'm like, is it? Why is it? I don't know. I don't find many things in my life boring. The only thing I think I ever called boring in print was I did write a review of the James Bond movie A View to a Kill for my high school newspaper, and I said it was boring. And I'm still guilt-ridden about it, but not a fan of View to a Kill. But anyway, Alexander, that is an interesting story. I didn't know that. I really want to read. I didn't know much about the Buffalino crime family, and I really want to read about it because really fascinating. You know, what was even more fascinating is when Russell would always talk about the people upstairs. You know, I thought that was, I don't want to meet them. Timbula the Spider Monkey says, have you seen the trailers for the 3D animated Lupin movie? I have Lupin the Third. For those of you who are anime fans, Lupin is the character goes way back, and the 3D. I think the movie looks awesome. So far, no word on a release date outside of Japan or a dub or subtitled version. I really want to see it. I love that character. I have not seen. I have not. I don't know what they're going to do with that, but it certainly looks good to me. I can't wait to see it. Look it up. It looks anybody who sees it, look it up. It looks really, really cool. I want to see it. Magic K says, I might have written you a letter about BTS of Snyder Cut. Fingers crossed. Does that mean behind the scenes? Written me a letter about the behind the scenes of the Snyder Cut? You might have. I don't know. You don't know if you did. I hope you did. Here is a letter from our man Jeffrey Mao. Jeffrey Mao wrote this on November 25th. Hey Rob, it's been a bit of time since I wrote my last letter to you, but I wanted to write to you about something that has been bugging me for a long time, and an upcoming publication of a book is bugging me again. I'm a bit of a nut, a big nut, about books and other supplementary material that provide additional information about a franchise universe. However, these books are not narrative books, but of the encyclopedia or guidebook kind. The main thing that bugs me is that sometimes they're written in universe, sometimes out of universe, and sometimes a mix of both. The supporting books for the A Song of Ice and Fire series has been the best in terms of being consistently written from an in-universe perspective. Also, there's been only 2 books so far, and George R.R. Martin has either written or co-written both. This is important because the books are not just simply information dumps done with no consideration. Martin has weaved a storyline into these books themselves. That's really cool. I've seen them, but I've not read them. They're written from the perspective of a maester who has a specific agenda in presenting the events and characters of the histories in a certain light. Because he is writing them during the Baratheon Lannister reign, the current regime is positively presented and their predecessors and enemies are not. On the other hand, let's look at our current favorite franchise, Star Wars, and see how well or not well they have handled the writing and the presentation of their supporting books and materials. I think the consensus must be it's been all over the place, and this is even before the decanonization of the EU threw an exceedingly confusing spanner into these books. Because while it's easy to decanonize a novel, there are myriad reference books where some portion of it is still canon because it describes canonical events and characters in canon films, but there are other parts that are now not canon. But even well before the Disney acquisition, there have been problems with the presentation of their books. Look at the visual encyclopedias. The first one was written by David Reynolds, who professionally was an archaeologist. I recall reading that he approached writing the encyclopedia as if he were an architect unearthing the artifacts of the Star Wars galaxy in the distant future. That's cool. That's really cool. I like that. I like that thought and approach. However, they never took it to the next step and actually writing the book as if it were indeed a book, like the other Dorling Kinderly books detailing actual real world. There would be gaps in knowledge because there simply was no record of specific events. Research would have to be done. There would be necessarily a scholarly approach to it. While this was okay for both the original trilogy and the prequel trilogy, the supporting books for the new sequel trilogy present a very confusing and ununified approach to their knowledge management. This is specifically due to the use of intentionally withholding certain knowledge as a key part of the story, i.e. the JJ mystery box. There were and still are many things that we don't know. The origins of the First Order, who is Snoke, who are Rey's parents, how and when did Ben Solo turn, what exactly happened at Luke's school, etc. So when any books were released, they were scoured over for any and all clues. A couple of clues that were found in the Last Jedi Visual Encyclopedia were particularly irksome to me. I have heard these clues mentioned many times on Star Wars YouTube video channels, but none of them ever stopped to think more deeply about them. The clues were that Snoke's ring was made of the same obsidian as was found in Darth Vader's castle on Mustafar, and that the inscription on the ring matches that written on the statues of the Dwardi, I may have the spelling wrong, that were located in Palpatine's office. Reading that, my spider sense started buzzing like crazy. First of all, that means that Snoke had a connection to either Vader and or Palpatine. Someone went to Vader's castle specifically to acquire the obsidian to turn it into Snoke's ring. The inscription suggests an intimate familiarity with Palpatine. My problems with this are manyfold. First of all, you don't write something like this without purpose. You're dropping a hint here that is supposed to hopefully lead somewhere. But given the stories we've heard about how there wasn't much of a plan for how the sequel trilogy would turn out, I can't trust that any information presented in any of these books is meaningful. Secondly, who decided that this was what Snoke's ring is made out of, and all that? Which is why it still bothers me that supposedly the Lucasfilm story group aren't the ones coming up with this information. Who has authorship in Lucasfilm with regard to these facts? Thirdly, and most importantly, how is this information known? Which is my biggest problem with not being either in-universe or out-of-universe. If the Last Jedi Encyclopedia was written in-universe, who could have possibly have known that Snoke even had a ring, and what the ring was made out of, and where it came from? You'd have to access his body and be able to examine the ring. And who even knew where Vader's castle was, or that he even had a castle? You could say that you had access to First Order records, but that's not exactly going to be easily available. Plus, I didn't see anyone giving Snoke an autopsy, and it's not like Mustafar is a big tourist attraction, so you can't realistically have gotten that information secondhand. Which leads me to the current, soon-to-be-released, in conjunction with The Rise of Skywalker, Star Wars book that has me bothered. It's a new book about the Force and the Jedi that is supposedly written from Luke's perspective. While I like the in-universe approach, it's too little, too late for me. Now, obviously, I haven't read the book, and curiously, only Star Wars Theory has been talking about it, but upon hearing what's in the book, it is already bothering me. Luke is going to be writing short briefs on different aspects of the Force, as well as on prominent Jedi and other Force users. Okay, I can accept he probably spent a lot of time in the Jedi archives after the defeat of the Empire and became knowledgeable with previous Jedi. However, he is supposed to be writing something about Rey. When in the hell did he have time to write anything about Rey after he was supposedly cut off from the Force at Ahch-To? He didn't seem to be in book-writing mood at that point. In fact, wasn't he going to kill himself? If you're going in-universe, then I'd rather have a propaganda story of the Clone War written by an Imperial historian, for example. That would be fun. So you see, Rob, this messed up situation that Star Wars is in is indicative of when a franchise doesn't have everyone on the same page. I see what you did there. Much less the same book, if the book even exists, and has a solid framework for knowledge management. Star Trek did a great job of that because they used Starfleet records. Everything in its databases and computer and officer logs has an explanation for how the information could be gathered. All the encyclopedias, guidebooks, blueprints, etc. could be presented as being extracted from Starfleet records. It really expanded the Star Trek universe in a believable way and added greatly to the verisimilitude. Somebody out there, drink. We can have blueprints for the Enterprise because, of course, the architects, engineers, and designers would have submitted the files and they would be stored in Starfleet databases. But when they say that the Sanar fleet system, when they say that the Sanar fleet systems built the TIE fighters, or that the group of AT-ATs during the Battle of Hoth took this particular route through the mountains that was called Blizzard Force, really, it's in the Star Wars Complete Guide to Locations, and 2 or 3 were already lost before making it to Echo Base, I have to question how this information is known and who decided that this information is true. So this has been a long letter, but as a lifelong Canon nut, I hope this letter touched a nerve or several in you, and I look forward to hearing your thoughts. Thanks, Jeffrey Mao. Well, Jeffrey, you and I, and you, of course, know that I am a Canonista, and this letter provided me much joy as I was reading it. And let me tell you, as many people know, in 1975, I think the first books that started, the first publications that really began this whole expanded universe idea came out. And look, I could be wrong about this. Things could have happened before, but in my own life, I will take you back to when I was 8 years old in 1975. And the two publications I'm referring to are the Franz Joseph Star Trek Technical Manual and the Franz Joseph Gilly and the Franz Joseph Enterprise Blueprints. Now, both the Enterprise Blueprints and the Franz Joseph Technical Manual were created from an in-universe perspective, meaning that the conceit of these things were that they actually came from the Star Trek universe. So when you actually took out the Starfleet, the technical manual, when you took out the little label that it came with, when you like from Ballantine Books, and you took it out, you were left with a book that said Starfleet Technical Manual, and the inside of the book was made to look as if it were a real book from the 23rd century. The same was true of the Star Trek blueprints. Now, when I received them as an 8-year-old, they were the coolest things I think I had ever owned. Because the idea that these publications actually came from the 23rd century was amazing. Like, to my 8-year-old self, who would have ever thought to do that? And I just assumed that because of the way these things were done, they were, I guess you would say, real, or as we would say now, they were canonical. Like, I didn't understand that they weren't necessarily canonical, that they weren't made in conjunction with Gene Roddenberry, that he didn't pour over all of them and give a seal of approval. The way they were presented to me was if they were real. Now, I learned many years later that they were not, but I still go back and I look at the Star Trek Technical Manual, the Starfleet Technical Manual, with the Articles of the Federation. It, of course, had the different iterations of starships. You had the Dreadnought, you had the Tug, and you had both the Destroyer and the Scout class with a single nacelle. I mean, my God, as a little kid, how many hours did I spend staring at those images? And then, of course, you have to ask your mom, you've already built all 12 of the Constitution class starships. And then what happens? What happens when you ask your mother to buy you another starship model, and she watches you cutting apart the pieces, and then you make a Scout? The Scout and the Destroyer were the easiest to make, because as for a kid to make, you there's the saucer section, there's the neck that goes down the secondary hull. You don't put the secondary hull there, and you just add a warp engine. How weird did my mom think I was when I have this version of the Enterprise with one warp nacelle? She's like, that's not the Enterprise. I'm like, I know, Mom. And you'd have to use a toothpick to make the deflector dish come out of the bottom of the saucer section. I mean, insanity. And I thought all of those things were real. And then when they created Starfleet Battles made those miniatures. They made the Franz Joseph miniatures. They used a lot of the material in the Franz Joseph Technical Manual. They used those and I thought it was all canon. And then in 1980, after Star Trek the Motion Picture came out, they had the Starfleet, or the Star Trek Spaceflight chronology. The cover of the book was obviously, it didn't look, they had dropped the in-universe conceit, at least with the cover, but the interior of it was the chronological history of the Star Trek universe leading up to Star Trek the Motion Picture. And I poured over that. I thought it was all real because Rick Sternbach was involved. And of course, when The Next Generation came out, all of that stuff was later rendered moot. But one of the things that we as fans love is our background material. Larry Nemeczek told me that he used to be what was called a backgrounder when he was younger. People like Doug Drexler and Larry Nemeczek were writing, they worked on like the Star Trek maps, and they were writing things about the Star Trek universe, but there was never a repository where any of this stuff was real. I wanted it to be real. And when you have George R.R. Martin involved in writing in-universe material about Westeros, you can say that it's canonical. And I think one of the things about being a fan is having all of that background material and how cool that stuff is. And the fan experience, it makes you feel closer to your fictional universe. And, you know, when you're reading, to me, the granddaddy of all of this is J.R.R. Tolkien, because he wrote so much about the background of the universe. He was really the first canonista, I think. But I've always wanted Star Trek canon to be correct. Now, you know, there's books, the autobiography of Captain Kirk, the autobiography of Spock that was written by one of the writers for Enterprise, who's president of WGA. And it's there is no group And you'd think the Lucasfilm Story Group would make sense of all this stuff, but that's one of the things that I think is forgotten when these franchises are now being presided over. It bums me out that one of the things, and I tweeted today, as a matter of fact, Captain April, one of the people that come to this chat, he made a video where he out of Doug Drexler wrote this great essay, I think earlier in the year, about canon and what does it mean to have canon in our fictional universes. And one of the, I think, big problems with now Star Wars especially, but also Star Trek, is part of the attraction of these universes has been the canonical history, the fictitious history that exists. And we love all that stuff. We love that fictitious history. And I want to believe, whether it's things I've bought over my lifetime, like the Moonbase Alpha technical notebook that was published by Starlog, I still have that. We want to believe that these things were approved because they are canonical. And that's why you read them. And like, I poured over this stuff as a kid. And whether it's the visual dictionaries or the encyclopedias, which constantly changes, Star Wars had such all of this rich canonical stuff that then the Clone Wars, they added to that. Now you watch The Mandalorian and it contradicts previous canon, and none of the novels are canonical anymore. And Grand Admiral Thrawn, who was created by Timothy Zahn, was later used. And is his appearance canonical? Did he really exist? And so one of the things that I think that is not considered by our corporate overlords, now especially CBS and Disney, is that the canonical universe that is expanded upon, whether it's Star Trek Online, whether it's the Star Wars video games, all of the different ships that exist, it's part of the attraction of these things to fans. And I think it's sort of unfortunate that there hasn't been an attempt, because what they've done since Disney Star Wars, they first said, okay, we're going to eliminate the EU. We're going to eliminate the expanded universe. And yet they've cherry-picked that expanded universe since they've taken over. And the story group, I mean, who's keeping all this straight? And for Star Wars, which people are into it, man. People now tell me all about the Mandalorians. I mean, how come I'm not learning about the Mandalorians? How come Mandalorian lore is being contradicted and all this? And now we're adding to the Mandalorian lore, and it's a bummer. It's a bummer. And I think that look, an entertainment company, if you went to Bob Iger and tried to explain to him what canonical Star Wars meant, I think intellectually he would be able to grasp what you were saying to him, but he would look at you and go, what the hell, what do we care? It wouldn't, it doesn't factor in. You can't give it a quantifiable value. And whereas I would say, oh, you can, because I think all of what pissed me off a lot about Star Trek Discovery is clearly they decided to go back and cherry pick things from the original series, like Spock smiling, which in my mind, you don't take what was obviously a production mistake and turn it into a whole character trait that you're later going to hang a character that we've seen for 50 years. You're going to retcon that character and make him into something he's not, simply because Michael Chabon says, I always wondered what it meant when Spock smiled in that episode. I'm like, dude, those are, as a longtime devout fan, those are moments that you have to overlook. You don't have to go back. Why do they keep going back to the cage and making everything in the cage canonical? I mean, it's such a weird thing to me. I like that they've gone back and mined the characters, but don't retcon Spock. You know, don't give him dyslexia or stuff like that. I hate when they do that. I hate it. But anyway, this is a really good topic. I could get into this for a long period of time. I'm sure people are like yawning, going, what are you even talking about? But hey, isn't that the fun of this show? Sometimes I just spin off on some crazy tangent. Hella Maris. I like that name. I don't know if you've ever sent in a chat before. If you have, I apologize, but if you haven't, welcome. And what a cool, I love this. Hella Maris asks, did the watermelon thing in high school? Don't put the entire bottle of vodka. It will ruin the watermelon completely. 2 to 3, is that deciliters? Is enough, and it kicks hard. chill before eating. Well, there you have it, Willow. Don't use the whole bottle of vodka and chill before eating. This is a good thing. I really, really, I love this. Now it makes me want to try it. I want to go get a watermelon. I want to vodka it up. And, why use vodka? I guess I would have to do, what I would do first? I guess I would do a taste test and find out which spirit works best with the watermelon. But since there is watermelon-infused vodka, I would imagine, vodka is probably a good bet. As a whiskey drinker myself, I'd like to try it. But you know what? Vodka makes sense. Rick Berg says that Michael and Denise Okuda is the best for Star Trek canon. I'm friends with Mike and Denise. I love Mike and Denise, and you are absolutely right. I mean, two of my favorite, as I dare say, I think the best canonical works in terms of coming from dealing with in-universe canon are the Okuda's Star Trek. The 2-volume encyclopedia that was released a few years back is amazing. It's a hardcover. If you're a Star Trek fan, of course, there's no Discovery in it really. But it's amazing. And also the Star Trek chronology, the history of the future, is unbelievable. And those books are absolutely, I consider them absolutely canonical. If you're a Star Trek fan and you want to deal with canonical work, you have to, Mike and Denise Okuda are exactly where you need to go. Those are great, great, great works. And I totally agree with you. I guess it bothers me how these companies underestimate the power of canon and how much fun it is. I mean, I have to say, I haven't decided whether or not. Look, I'll flat out tell you right now, I have a real prejudice against Damon Lindelof, not as a person, but through his work. And while I'm deeply conflicted about how I'm going to ultimately feel about Watchmen, I will say this, even I've been corrected on it. As far as a canonical extension of the Watchmen comic book, I got to give him 100%. Damon Lindelof and his writing staff have, even though one of the big central conceits of this is they're answering a question that was never answered in the comic book, I find, while it's agenda-driven, I find the answer to be highly compelling, and I got to give it up. We'll see where it's going to go. There's 3 episodes. There's 4. There's 6, 7, 8, and 9. We shall see. Or no, there's 7, 8, 9. There's 3 episodes left. We already had 6, which is probably my favorite episode of TV this year. Great stuff, but we will see. Here, this one comes from Joe Foley. Joe Foley says, "Hey, Rob, hope all is well. I just wanted to send in a quick recommendation for you, John Campia, and the rest of the Post-Geek Singularity. I know you're not much of a gamer these days, but I think a video game you should experience is called Detroit Become Human." That's how he writes it, Detroit Become Human. It is the closest experience I've found where the world of movies and video games cross over. It's about the future of AI and sounds up your alley. That does sound up my alley. I also recommend playing hands-on for the true experience. Watching a walkthrough would not be as satisfying in my opinion. The game is for PS4 and maybe Steam. The best part is I think it's only $20, maybe even cheaper for Black Friday. I would love to hear what you think. Thanks as always, Joe F. P.S. I never knew I would walk out of a chat about movies and geekdom respecting Prince more than ever. Yes, you should respect Prince. And by God, for those of you who don't know, it's already available on Spotify, but the Prince estate, who has been killing it in terms of releasing Prince material, this Tuesday, the physical media version, both the $225 vinyl version, which as much as I want to own it, I mean, it's not necessarily practical for me now, or the $50 version of 1999, which has like 35 tracks from the vault, including great B-sides like Irresistible Bitch, I Like the Way You Walk, I Really Dig the Way You Kiss, great, from the 1999 era. 1999 is one of my favorite Prince albums, and not because of Delirious or Little Red Corvette, but because of songs like All the Critics Love You in New York, International Lover, Let's Pretend We're Married, DMSR, Automatic. I mean, it's an incredible album. That's not to say that the hits, that 1999, Little Red Corvette, and Delirious aren't great songs, but that album, very, very strong. I love that album, and they're releasing it with all the bells and whistles. There's new liner notes. It's been remastered, 35 tracks, many of which we haven't heard, including a Prince track called Vagina. That's right, ladies and gentlemen. I've always wanted Prince to write a song called Vagina, and he did, and now I get to hear it for the very first time. I'm very excited. It's a monumental release. It absolutely is going to go to my top 10 pieces of physical media for the year, and I highly recommend, if you have the means, I highly recommend picking it up. It's available, but you can just listen to it on Spotify if you want, but I can't not own it. There was a time in my life when I was obsessed with Prince CDs, and I was buying bootleg CDs, and I have like 150 Prince CDs, and it was crazy. And so how can I not want to get this? But Joe, I'm glad you left this chat with an appreciation of Prince. Everybody should have an appreciation of Prince. If I could reach it, I would take down my tambourine that I have up there, that I think it was the Gold Experience tour. I'm drawing a blank on which tour it was, but I did buy at a show at the Staples Center. I did buy a Prince tambourine, and it is up on the wall. I have it hanging on the wall, and I do love it. Let's see. Here's another one, and this comes from B Sweaty. That's right, B Sweaty. Hello, Rob, and hello to all my fellow geeks and nerds. I wanted to write in today and give you my thoughts on The Mandalorian. I've seen 3 episodes that have been released so far, and I will start by saying I enjoyed them immensely. I will admit they're not perfect, and there are a few problems with them, but boy, have they been fun to watch. I do agree with your opinion that the show does feel small, like it all takes place in one small area. The Mandalorian walks from one place, and 50 paces later, he's in the secret lair of the other Mandos. This did take me out of the show a bit, but I wish they would have added a small shot of him using a speeder to go to a different city and not just walking up and down the same street. There was another scene that bothered me a bit. During the end of the 3rd episode, The Sin, the Mandalorian leaves after the battle in the street, and as he is leaving the surface of the planet, another Mando, I believe it was the same Mando that he fought with earlier in the episode, flies up beside him and salutes him before flying off. This action of the salute really took me out again. I think the scene would work better had the Mando simply beat his chest plate with the sign of a fist as a sign of solidarity. I did, however, love the Mandalorian's comments. I did, however, like the Mandalorian comment, I have to get me one of these, meaning the jetpack. Yes, this seemed to save that scene for me. All of this said, do you believe that as fans, we expect too much from our beloved franchises? Are we as fans too overly critical of every little detail? And what are your thoughts on the possibility that The Mandalorian could help heal some of the wounds in the fan base? Thank you for all you do for us in the Post-Geek Singularity. Stay sweaty, my friend. Be sweaty. I can't help but read your name and think about the late, great John Schnepp. You know, I've been talking about The Mandalorian all day today, as we well know. I mean, look, what I like about The Mandalorian ultimately at the end of the day is authorship. You know, while other directors are taking a crack at it, it really is, like with all television, it is Jon Favreau's story. He created it. It's his story. And I think for better or for worse, the thing that I like most about The Mandalorian is its authorship. I feel it. Jon Favreau had a very specific thing that he was going for. It's very classical. Look, I think having directed Iron Man, I think that was sort of a nod to all of it. And the fact that Mandalorians, they have jetpacks, and we've seen people use them for short hops. But the idea that a jetpack, I don't necessarily believe you could fly like Iron Man because you don't have the repulsor rays in your hands. But I'll overlook that. I thought it was cool. But you know, I think we absolutely should demand the most from our fandom, especially when you're following these things. Look. These are very big money-making propositions for anybody who owns them. And I think it's only right that if, in fact, you become a fan of something, and look, I've spent thousands of dollars, if not tens of thousands of dollars, on my fandom on Star Trek and on Star Wars and all that, and I've never regretted it. But I only wish that the people that are making these things have paid as much attention, or the people working on these things have paid as much attention to these things as I have. And I think all fans feel that way, especially if you're really into something and it's a fictitious universe. And there's nothing more fun than doing the deep dives into those universes. And that's what we want. And I don't think it's too much to ask. And the problem is, how do you, and I'm speaking from a business perspective, how do you do that? You know, the people that work in the entertainment business, and I see this, the Zack Snyder release the Snyder Cut people are a perfect example of this to me. On one hand, I'm totally with them. I would love to see the Snyder Cut released. I'd love to see Zack Snyder's 3-hour and whatever version, however long it is, of his original, because it's about authorship. He had a vision that he was starting with Man of Steel. He carried it through Batman v Superman. And I feel that Justice League, I would like to have seen, especially his vision of Justice League, finished. Who wouldn't want that? However, what happens with fandom, then it's you start these movements like release the Snyder Cut saying, well, there's this version, it's got to be out there, without truly understanding the process of making movies from the studio perspective. And then people attack me when I worked at Warner Brothers in physical production. I mean, like, I worked at the studio. I hung out in the post-production department. I have a working knowledge of how that particular studio worked. Admittedly, it was a while ago, of course, decades ago, but still, it's not like movie making has changed that much. Of course, digital post-production is very different than the world was, but still the same holds true of what happens when you have an unfinished version of the movie. So yet, we as fans, people attack me. I really wish, though, that fandom had a bigger or greater understanding of the business aspects of what goes into making movies and television. But on the other hand, I wish that the studios who own these great venerable franchises that we love would spend more money or figure out, because there's a lot of people that would come in and offer to service the fan base. And look, in the long run, having a working history, a canonical working history that somebody was constantly compiling can only help the writers and the directors. I mean, the Star Wars franchise, The Mandalorian, proves that there's stories to be told in the Star Wars universe, and that's what people want. The Star Wars universe, what is not understood is it's not just about the main characters. The universe already exists. I mean, the Burnett axiom: never put your universe before your characters and your story. Your universe will grow out of the characters in the story. The characters in the story are the seeds of your great universe. But the Star Wars universe grew, and it grew out of all of the things that they made. So it's a living, vibrant universe. But what's happened is people have lived with this universe for over 40 years, all the different things that they've put out. And this idea that only the movies are canonical, what you end up doing then is you end up undercutting your fan base, which is the people that are buying your material and buying all this stuff. I mean, I'll flat out tell you, I did buy a model kit of J.J. Abrams' 2009 Enterprise when it became available, because I built every other model of the Enterprise. I bought it. I don't like that design. The Revell model's pretty good. Haven't finished it yet. But I have not, nor will I ever buy anything that has come out of Star Trek Discovery. I am a Star Trek fanatic all the way back. I love Star Trek spaceships. I love their starship designs. I hate even the new Enterprise. I hate all of the design work that came out of Star Trek Discovery. The fact that they dispensed in my mind, they dispensed with round warp nacelles. I mean, sure, they'll put it on their Enterprise because they have to, but man, they let me down, and I won't buy. I mean, I'm a lifelong buyer of Star Trek models and spaceships and all those things. They've lost me since 2009. I am not a fan of anything that has been designed for Star Trek, and that is because you have people that have come in who want to make it their own. And I understand that when you work within something, why would you want to come in and work on a franchise that has already been around for 50 years without doing something to make it your own. And I think that is a big mistake when it comes. Now we're reading stories about how the Section 31 series is going to be Michelle Yeoh's Unforgiven. I'm like, you've ruined Section 31. As cool as Section 31 was in Deep Space Nine, they destroyed any goodwill that they had with me as a fan because they didn't pay attention. I'm hard pressed to know, did you ever watch a Deep Space Nine episode with Section 31 in it? Like, did you go back and watch those episodes? But anyway, I think that it's a big mistake that these long-running franchises, whether it's Alien, whether it's Predator, whether it's Star Wars, or whether it's Star Trek, I really think that you've got to hire a group of people, maybe fans or whatever, to keep all of this material, this canonical material straight, because when there's so many ancillary markets, when you're drawing upon this and you're telling people want a straight fictional history of the Star Trek and Star Wars universe and the Alien universe. Now that you've gone back and forth in time, we want to know. We as fans want to immerse ourselves in that. And that's why if you're going to have video game tie-ins, they've tried, it's so funny to me, they've been trying to make transmedia happen as long as they've been trying to make fetch happen. And the secret to making this stuff happen is to make it all work together. And they keep trying and saying that they're going to do that, but then they always go against it. Because when a new creator comes in to make a new Star Wars movie, they don't want to be constrained by previously existing canon. Why would you want to be? I think the secret to have these things work is that you owe it to the fans to do it. I don't know if anybody will. I don't know, how do you put that in a line item on a budget? But they should hire a team. That's what they have, their story team or whatever. JS asks a very good question. Rob, thoughts about Jeremiah Johnson or the outlaw Josie Wales? They are outside the geek strike zone, but I thought you might have a worthwhile opinion on either or both. Well, Jeremiah Johnson is Robert Redford, and outlaw Josie Wales is Clint Eastwood. Now, look, I think that I do think Westerns are part of the geek strike zone. And I say this as somebody who I had a fundamental aversion to Westerns growing up, because I just like the iconography of science fiction better. So I had a better understanding of that. And I would just reject, I have to say, as I was growing up, I didn't like Westerns. I didn't. And it wasn't until I started reading, like in my teenage years, I started reading about Sergio Leone's spaghetti Westerns, the Man with No Name trilogy. When I watched them, I was able to sort of understand that those movies in particular, like when you're watching, what is it, Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, and it's supposed to be set during the Civil War, it's like, what country is this being fought in? And reading The Dark Tower, the first Dark Tower, and Roland Deschain and all that, and Stephen King's The Dark Tower, I was able to go back and understand that I started looking at Westerns as a myth, the mythological underpinnings of Westerns, and really, really starting to love them. And then I started going back and watching some of the great Westerns, not just the Man with No Name trilogy, but the other Clint Eastwood movies, like High Plains Drifter, which people say is an unofficial movie like this. And I can't believe there's somebody doing yard work now. But anyway, I think the great Westerns and outlaw Josie Wales and Jeremiah Johnson, I think it's Jeremiah Johnson 69. I keep thinking it's early 70s. But I think absolutely Westerns are definitely part of the geek strike zone. They're not thought of that way now because I think they're not, even though Star Wars takes place in a galaxy a long time ago, it's still relatively futuristic, or the Marvel Cinematic movies of today. But I do think in order to understand, look, The Mandalorian is far more enjoyable if you know a lot more about classical Westerns. You can see things that are in them. So I think absolutely you have to watch these films, and they have to be part of your own geek lexicon, because they are part of the geek lexicon. I mean, Westerns are a genre that a lot of geek movie tropes come from. And I remember thinking, what is it, 92, when Unforgiven came out? Of course, it resonated far more if you watched Clint Eastwood's past work. But I think that idea of an over-the-hill guy who was trying to make good on his life that was changed by a woman, doesn't want something to happen to him. I mean, if you haven't seen those movies, it doesn't resonate as much. But and it's funny because if you think about Unforgiven in Clint Eastwood's past movies, even if he's doing amoral things, he was always the hero. And I think you absolutely need to know about these movies. I haven't seen Jeremiah Johnson in a long time, but I like Jeremiah Johnson. I think that's a Warner Brothers movie. I think Jeremiah Johnson is Warner Brothers. And I remember the first time I saw it was on VHS, my God, in the 80s. Yeah, it's 72. It's 1972. Yeah, and it's based on a book. So, yeah. And, now that I'm looking at this, you know who wrote Jeremiah Johnson? John Milius was a co-writer of Jeremiah Johnson, who, of course, wrote Conan and worked on Apocalypse Now and directed Conan. John Milius, he's the man. But yeah, and Jeremiah. Wait, hang on. Oh, Sidney Pollack directed Jeremiah. You got to watch Jeremiah Johnson. Look at that. Sidney Pollack directed it, and John Milius wrote it. Great stuff. Well, listen, everybody. I'm going to bring an end to this chat. Robservations, the show about something. Robservations number 287. Oh my God, closing in on episode 300. Amazing. We're getting there. Rick Berg, by the way, chimes in and says John Ford made great westerns and great sci-fi. John Ford is one of America's great directors. But wait a minute, am I missing something? John Ford, great sci-fi. Am I missing that? I don't know. Am I? I could be. As far as sci-fi goes, I mean, I love The Searchers. But maybe I'm missing something in terms of sci-fi. I don't recall that John Ford made a sci-fi movie. But man, look at John Ford's The Man Who Shot Liberty Valance. Oh, God, such a great, what a great director. Anyway, yes, bringing a thanks, by the way, Rick, getting that one in. Thanks to everyone supporting the channel. I will be back tomorrow, December 1st tomorrow, everybody. My God, December 1st. That is crazy talk. Anyway, thank you for being here for Robservations episode 287 and continuing to support the channel. Please go to the website at theburnettwork.net. Send me letters. Send me letters. You can also support the channel, support the website there. You can sign up. You can sign up for $1 a year if you want. Also, I did put a link to this sweatshirt to all this little swag I have up on TeePublic. I really recommend. I really like this sweatshirt. I think it's really great. The actual quality of the shirt. You can go there. They're always having sales. You can get t-shirts for like $13. And also, if I might plug Bill Hunt, look up the Digital Bits and get that Melier shot first shirt. It's awesome. And I want to thank, of course, my great moderating staff. I want to thank Detective Jim. I want to thank Greg Smith. I want to thank the Honorable Mayor Mike Bodden. And I want to thank my newest moderators, Louis Yu, and, of course, Jordy Lyons, for being great moderators, for making this place more fun. Not that it wasn't fun already, but at least keeping it manageable. So thank you, guys. I appreciate the work. And I will end this chat by saying, as I always say, every person you meet has a story to tell you have yet to hear. All you have to do is listen. And with that, I bid all of you imagination connoisseurs and all of you members of this, the Post-Geek Singularity, you guys are the best Force users on the web, let's face it. I bid you all farewell and have a better day. Oh, and by the way, if you like these chats, please hit like, please subscribe. Always good for the old YouTube analytics. Who knows what's happening with all these YouTube changes? I don't know. Craziness. Have a better day.